WXOS, WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, and KPNT HD2 Collinsville. 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Also today, as you saw, Brandon Saad wasn't on the ice. He's gone on waivers. He will go on waivers today at 1 o'clock. I talked to he and his representative, and obviously if he gets claims tomorrow, he'll be on a new team. If not, he'll go down to play in Springfield. That will open up some space for some different players that I'd like to see get in the lineup and see where it goes.
That was President of Hockey Operations Doug Armstrong on Tuesday following that little press conference that he had surrounding the Blues. We found out that Brandon Saad was headed to waivers. Yesterday on our show, we announced that Brandon Saad officially cleared waivers at 1 o'clock Central Time. Elliot Friedman, Jeremy Rutherford both tweeted out that Saad clearing waivers, so he was headed to the Springfield Thunderbirds. That's why I returned with that audio. And that, of course, it is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN with Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns. I'm Alex Ferrario. Yesterday, as we got off of the air, the fast lane opened up with the news. We kind of broke it in the rewind. Brandon Saad and the Blues mutually agreed to waive the contract, terminate the contract so that Brandon Saad can become a free agent. So he was placed once again on waivers yesterday. So today at 1 o'clock, if he clears waivers, which the expectations is he will because he just cleared waivers, both sides will wash away that contract that had $4.5 million cap hit this year, $4.5 million next year. That is a massive gift for the Blues, Graham, because I don't know what took place in the personal side with Brandon Saad of what changed, because it sounded like from what Doug Armstrong said, it was agreed upon he was going to play for the Springfield Thunderbirds this season. And instead, things changed. It came today that it was, nope, not going to it. Maybe it was the family side of things. His wife just had a baby. Maybe he didn't want to be away for 3 months. Or maybe there's a team that's interested in Brandon Saad. But this is a massive win for the Blues, because now they don't have the what if we can't move him again this season. What if Brandon Saad's still on the team, our salary cap hit for next year? They just opened up $4.5 million by mutually terminating this contract towards their cap. I think it was $3.6 million in cash that the Blues are getting back for next year. But fans worry about the cap hit. And Jeremy Rutherford, in his piece earlier today on The Athletic, stated that with the cap expected to go to $95 million next year and his $4.5 million coming off of the book, it's expected the Blues to have about $10 million in cap space next season. What was going to be about $5 million in cap space, this gives the Blues opportunities to navigate their roster. And what we talked about yesterday, this was Doug Armstrong chipping away at pieces that he can move off of his team.
Yeah, two things that really stuck out to me from this. Like, if you go back to not even 2 years ago, last year, and you have Torrey Krug, which who knows if he comes back or not. The moves that the Blues have made suggest that you wouldn't think that he's going to come back. I mean, you bring in Broberg and then you bring in Cam Fowler for next season included. Like, you start to speculate as to whether or not Torrey Krug's going to come back or not. That's $6.5 million right there. Now you have Brandon Saad, who, you know, just went on waivers and is no longer on the team. You just cleared up $11 million of cap space there. And for all the talk we've had over the years about how the Blues are really in a tough cap situation,
yeah,
they've taken $11 million out of that equation, which is huge moving forward. It really can't be understated how big moving $11 million is. And credit to Doug Armstrong. Like, you know, the Torrey Krug thing you can't really control. That's just, you know, when you have a pre-arthritic condition, like, that's just a health thing that happened that you get the cap space for. But this Brandon Saad move is all really Doug Armstrong.
Yeah, it is. It's looking at the roster and realizing, look, there's certain areas that we can fix right now. You saw it with the Scott Perunovich trade. You saw it now with Brandon Saad mutually. And this is the thing. It didn't have to come to this. Like this, the expectations, at least hearing from Doug Armstrong, was this guy was going to play for the Springfield Thunderbirds for the rest of this season. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday. You know, what happens when he plays the rest of this season and you aren't able to make a trade for him? Are you able to to touch back into the trade market in the offseason and find a partner for Brandon Saad. Because if not, he's on your team next year. And you're putting, I think he was still costing the Blues $1.1 million towards the cap if he's playing in the, or not in the cap, the cash that they're paying when he's playing in the minor leagues. And they were able to just walk away from this thing. It opens up the playing time, which they're seeing now, but it also opens up the flexibility for Doug Armstrong.
Here's the second thing that really stood out to me about this. This should be an alarm to every single one of the players on the team.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not playing up to the standards, action will be taken. You just had a player who's not that old. He's, 32, Brandon Saad?
Yeah.
Won multiple Stanley Cups in his career.
Just coming off of a 25-goal season.
Veteran, this is a player that's not a nobody on this team. Like, he's been here for 4 years now, put up goals. He's played well.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you're not going to play up to, your ability, to what the team expects from you, then we'll take the actions necessary. And I think that's also important because for a team that, you're questioning some things with habits, and this is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call to have a veteran player, go through waivers and then just mutually agree to terminate the contract. That is a message being sent to the roster.
It's a good point because we've seen it already twice this season in the NHL, and both with the New York Rangers. In the offseason, they tried to move on from Barclay Goodrow. They were unable to do so they basically said, fine, we'll put you on waivers. I think it was because he wasn't willing to waive his no-trade clause to go to San Jose. They put him on waivers. San Jose claims him. And then in the middle of the season, they do the exact same thing with Jacob Trouba, where they tell them, look, waive the no-trade to this team or you will be placed on waivers. It's a very hardcore move in terms of looking at, because you disrupt your team chemistry. Now, the Rangers have fixed it a little bit since, but there was a lot going on with that team for about a 2-month stretch following the Jacob Trouba, because Chris Drury is threatening guys, sending them to the minor leagues if they aren't willing to make the trade. But it's a last resort move, and I don't think that's what this was. I think this was Brandon Saad looking at it and saying, I don't want to go play in Massachusetts for the next 3 months, be away from my family. And my tinfoil Ferrario theory here is there was another team that looked at him and talked to him and said, hey, we'd like to get you on our team. We can't bring you on for $4.5 million. So if we can figure this out, we'd love to have you. And if you're Brandon Saad, you have pride. You don't want to go to the minor leagues. Everybody was tweeting up the picture of him the last year he was playing in Rockford. There's some pride factor into that. So my guess is he's going to end up on another team after 1 o'clock today and probably have a shot at a Stanley Cup. But that's not an easy thing to do, to walk away from $4.5 million. So I don't think this was a threat to Brandon Saad of, look, you need to mutually agree to terminate this contract or you're going to the minors. But it is something that Doug Armstrong can resort back to and say, look, if you're not playing up to the standards that we deem you an NHL forward, you will find yourself on waivers. And you will have that reality of, hey, 31 teams didn't want you. Now I've got to go to the minor league. So we'll see how it all pans out, whoever he signs with, if he signs with somebody. But Brandon Saad not going to the Springfield Thunderbirds, and the Blues opening up $4.5 million in cap space. Now, this, I think, is the bigger question that I'm already seeing on the Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. Do the Blues go out there and utilize this cap space? So what they opened up essentially is, I believe JR had it in his piece, they're giving them about $5 million in cap space for the rest of this season because it's retroactive. Obviously, he's played half of this season. The cash that gets saved because you're terminating the contract, but it does open up. Right now, Puckpedia says they have $4.7 million in cap space. I don't think they need to deal with moves right now. Unless there's something that sets your future up for success, I'm not looking at this saying we've just opened up $4.7 million in cap space. Let's go trade for a third-line center, or let's go trade for a second-line winger. That's not where they're at. Doug made it very clear yesterday, 2 days ago, wants to see what some of these young guys have to offer, like an Alex Texier, and he's not dealing away players that are going to help them in the next couple of years for something that just temporarily fixes a problem. There's bigger problems on the team that they're trying to resolve. So it's great to have cap space. Frankly, if you're Tom Stillman, really nice to have the cap space and saving some of the cash that you were spending. I'm not going to sit here and start getting really antsy and say, let's go trade for a Mikael Granlund. Let's go trade for this guy to temporarily fix something that might be a bigger issue underneath the surface.
I don't see them utilizing the cap space this year, but I definitely do for next year. I definitely, because this isn't just something that obviously they get the money off the books this season, but more importantly for me, they get the money off the books next season. They're completely free of his contract next season. So I could see them, if something becomes available this season, at the trade deadline, whatever it may be, then I could see them, making a trade and bringing in some salary this season, but it would also have to be for the future. It's not necessarily for this season particularly. It's for next year and beyond.
Right. And that's kind of where this really comes down to, because what this sets up, you get that 4.5 next year. You've got Fox's money that's off of the books. You have a couple of other guys. That's why it was so important that they re-signed Jake Neighbors earlier this year. They do have Joel Hofer that they'll have to approach. Tyler Tucker and Ryan Suter are UFAs. Their team is set. They've got the guys in place. Now you've opened up more cap space to really kind of adjust what takes place. Like this one that we just got on the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646 from the 618. Why wouldn't you go out there now with cap space, trade a couple of draft picks, and go get a third-line center to give your team an opportunity to push? If I'm being frank,
it's reckless a little bit.
It is. And I don't know if this team's in a position to push. I don't know if I'm going to go out there and go to a team that, frankly, is going to be asking for a lot until you get to the trade deadline and say, hey, we want this player because we need a push now. I think that's a little too reckless.
I think that, go back to what Doug Armstrong has said in the past, the team will tell me what I need to do at the deadline.
Right.
The team has told him what this season is. It's an inconsistent team. It's a 500 team. Why are you going to go out and spend $4 million for this season when the team is telling you that they're not built currently to compete? Now, you take that $4 million and you put it towards next year, then maybe. At that point, yes, you're still building. You're still, looking to compete next year and get into the playoffs. Not saying this team has completely written themselves off this season for playoffs, but obviously, next year is going to look, the chances are going to look better next year than they currently do right now.
Right. And I think if they're going to try and make a push for the playoffs, they want to see what these guys are. Again, I think Doug basically told you, I want to observe. I want to observe where this team is at. You don't aggressively start wheeling and dealing unless it's something that makes sense for the future. And we'll get into this a little bit later because there was a piece out on The Athletic earlier today that brought up the Elias Pettersson situation and the Blues. So we'll get to that in the 12 o'clock hour. Real quick, though, from Puckpedia, Saad mutually terminates his contract. He loses $5.4 million cash owing to him. The Blues saved the $4.5 million cap hit instead of just the $1.15 money if he was in the minors. And with no other roster moves, they would finish $670,000 below the cap, absorbing some of the performance bonuses, which, remember, Ryan Suter could get a lot of performance bonuses in terms of playing time, $2.2 million. So that's the other factor into all of this. They're opening up the cap space and the money, the cash flow that they can pay the performance bonuses for some of the players that they're anticipating this year.
Yeah, and a couple things from the Air Comfort Service text line. One thing that a couple of people have brought up is this cap space that we're talking about, including Nick Leddy's salary. We were talking about this a little bit before the show. He's not on LTIR right now, correct, Alex?
Correct.
So his salary is counting towards the cap right now as we speak.
Correct. Yeah, he's on the cap. He's on IR, so it's going towards your salary cap. Right now, the only thing that's not impacting your salary cap is Torrey Krug, who's on LTIR. So when you look at Puckpedia, and also, mind you, Puckpedia does not have the expected cap for next year at $95 million, like JR said, and that's the projection from Gary Bettman from the NHLPA. Elliot Friedman reported that last week. With Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Please get in on the Air Comfort Service text line today, 314-399-9646. Also, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. You can see us on the Air Alliance team studio cams. We've got a really fun show today. David Backus, former Blues captain, is going to join us at 1 o'clock. We've got Joe Vitale at 12 o'clock. And coming up in 15 minutes, the American Hockey League Springfield Thunderbirds head coach, Steve Konowalchuk, is going to join us to talk a little bit about these Blues prospects that I know so many Blues fans are excited for, like Dvorsky, like Otto Stenberg. So we'll get to Steve Konowalchuk in 15. But coming up next, JP Morosi had a report on Nolan Arenado yesterday on MLB Network that all signs are pointing towards him playing for the Cardinals this year. Are we making too much of Nolan Arenado being back with the Cardinals moving forward? We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN.
Take the fast lane home weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Carrie Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The fast lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling.
When was the last time you checked if your car and home rates were competitive? Carlton Insurance.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Based on some conversations I've had this week, the chances continue to increase that by the time the Cardinals arrive to spring training in Jupiter, Florida, Arenado will still be a member of the St. Louis Cardinals because of that number you see on the bottom of your screen. Owed $74 million over the next 3 seasons. And we ask ourselves, how many teams in baseball on the 29th of January have that kind of payroll capacity and flexibility to add a player who is candidly coming off of a down offensive year?
That was our boy, John Morosi, who, God, this time of the year, I think he just thrives. But, of course, he was on there with Harold Reynolds yesterday talking about Nolan Arenado. And with Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. So, take it for what it is. It is still the offseason. There still is the waiting period for Alex Bregman. If he signs with the Houston Astros, does the Boston Red Sox return to the Cardinals? There's still a lot of ifs up in the air. But just based off of John Morosi's reporting, it sure seems like Nolan Arenado is going to be a Cardinal at the start of this year. And frankly, it's kind of my thought process this whole time because of that much money and the difficulty of making this trade with him. And we've talked so much. I think we've touched every single corner of this Nolan Arenado discussion in the offseason, fellas. And frankly, there's a lot of ramifications if he's with St. Louis. But Bradford, you brought up a pretty interesting opinion for us in the office that I wanted to give you your stage to go off of. If he's back with the Cardinals, are we making too much out of it?
Yeah, the bottom line, guys, is that here we are 3 full months into the MLB offseason. It's well established that you're under 2 weeks away from the beginning of spring training. And throughout this entire process, we've been waiting on that Bregman merry-go-round or the domino to fall, right? It's been going around and around. Now, a couple of days ago, we have Houston shipping Presley out to Chicago, trying to move up more or move around additional room, additional cash, perhaps. But at the same time, at what point are you basically just, arriving at that realization that Arenado in the here and now is here to stay in this market? And for me, Alex, it really comes down to, with everybody reporting to Jupiter, Florida, with Nolan Arenado being such a meticulous, preparation-oriented and detail-oriented player. For the foreseeable future, moving forward, you are looking at a situation right now in which he is going to be there entrenched in the hot corner. And I'm left to wonder whether we've been making too big of a deal, at least on some level, as far as if Arenado is there in place with this team, the young mix, some of the veterans as well. If this team in a Central Division, it's been well established, we talked about it before the show, that is conceivably up for grabs, does he not give you a much better opportunity of competing right here in the present? And what's the worst that could honestly happen? Is it going to create shock waves? Is it going to create all these tremors throughout the clubhouse? I highly doubt it, because if you're talking about somebody who can still be that impactful for your team and produce, that is going to nullify all of the whispers, all of the noise that we have heard over the better part of the offseason, because when the results really start to matter post-spring training and you're moving into April, that's all you want. A veteran pillar on whom you still think you can rely, whether or not he approaches the career standards that we discussed last week.
I see where you're coming from, and here's the one thing that we always have to remind ourselves, because yes, we do, and I think right now, if you put it on the hockey perspective, we are seeing days of our lives happen every single day for the Vancouver Canucks. But typically pro athletes don't have drama. There's some, but typically, you go about your business, you're able to fight through, regardless if you have a jaded relationship. And I don't think any of those are the cases with Nolan Arenado. I think we saw this past season, Nolan Arenado has built a pretty decent role in terms towards the latter half of the season of taking over and kind of being the guy that was bringing some of the younger players together. I do think the problem really comes into play when Nolan Arenado struggles. And that's my biggest concern with all of this. I understand the playing time that people are talking about, and that is a massive one. Because when Nolan Arenado's at third, where does Nolan Gorman go? For me, Nolan Gorman is going to be your everyday second baseman. Brendan Donovan is going to be that super utility guy. And honestly, you're probably going to get everyday playing time for him if Lars Nootbaar's not going to be in the lineup consistently. Yes, somebody's going to lose playing time, but you're still going to get the main guys in playing time in terms of Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn. To me, those are the big three, and honestly, Ivan Herrera. Those are the big four that are going to be playing on a nightly basis for the Cardinals. The problem, in my opinion, comes if the Cardinals struggle and Nolan Arenado is a big catalyst. Why? Yeah. Does that team start to have issues amongst themselves? And I don't think so. I hope not. I hope that professional athletes can find their way through that. But if you're Nolan Arenado, do you take your personal struggles and the want to be traded out of St. Louis this past offseason? Does that carry over into the clubhouse, onto the field when things aren't going well? Because if it does, you got a lot of young guys that are impressionable at this point that we heard at winter warmup. Lars Nootbaar knows, like, hey, we've been protected by all of these veterans for the longest time. It's our turn to step up and start handling some of this adversity. That's fine. Young guys can figure out how to handle adversity on the field. How do you handle it off the field when you got a Nolan Arenado who's frustrated? We saw it play out with the Colorado Rockies in those last couple of years.
We did. And we saw a fair number, obviously, Grant, of struggles and some issues as far as dealing with some of the inconsistencies from one Nolan Arenado in the last year plus in St. Louis. Let's make no mistake about it. We understand that it wasn't some sort of a banner campaign, but as we have discussed as well, I don't think that we can overlook the possibility of there's so much motivation. There's such a motivational factor in play as well. Let's say in the event, let's flip it around and say that Arenado gets off to a gangbusters-like start. Well, that only enhances his individual personal value as it relates to other would-be suitors around the deadline as well. So you can have it in one of two ways. Your team collectively is benefiting from a great start from an Arenado in 2025, or even if you are treading water once again in the Central Division, but he is producing at the level that you would hope, for which you would hope. That does nothing but basically beef up his market, and who knows the kind of returns you could reap at the potential trade deadline.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, if Arenado does continue to struggle and the team struggles, then you have the worst of both worlds, because the team's not going anywhere and you're just diminishing the trade value for Arenado. So it can go one of two ways. At the same time, if the team is playing well, weird things happen. There's always like a team or two every year that's like, how are they good?
Milwaukee every single year.
Right. And with the NL Central being the way that it is, if the Cardinals do play better than they have the past couple of years, which is a big if, but if they do, then you're talking about, potentially keeping Arenado at the trade deadline rather than trading him, it is an interesting sort of thing to look at.
Yeah, if you're in the mix. And honestly, at this stage, as we are here at the tail end of January, if Arenado were to stay, if he is in place, if he is immersed in the equation here, you're starting to then make peace, I think, Alex, with the realization that the fact that a guy like an Alec Burleson isn't exactly going to be getting the prime reps he otherwise would have received. And I am still dubious about that catcher situation, too, because so many at-bats, I believe, in the event that if Arenado had been jettisoned already, those would have gone to not just a Nolan Gorman automatically plugging him into DH, but Ivan Herrera, because you know how this team has proceeded with respect to defense behind the plate. It does muddle that situation.
He's Bradford Bruns, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we'll talk with Steve Konowalchuk, the head coach for the Springfield Thunderbirds, the Blues minor league affiliate, next on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to win tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Enter to score free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app. Brought to you by Ted Drew's, serving original frozen custard since 1929.
Elite Comfort Experts is heating and cooling done the right way. Family values delivered straight to your home with a BBT Torch Award for Ethics to prove it. We are dedicated to earning our customers' trust. No gimmicks, just guarantees. Trust us at EliteComfortExperts.com.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.
My name is Dan. I was injured in a car accident. I don't know how any of this works. I'd never been hit like this before. Brown & Crouppen has been there for me from day one. They came out, met at my house. It was more about me as an individual. It was more about taking care of me. It was more about representing me. And that feels great.
Here for you whenever.
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Bradford Bruns and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're back here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN as we head now to our Collier and Thompson hotline and head out to Des Moines, Iowa, where the Springfield Thunderbirds are going to be playing later on this evening. Or no, I'm sorry, they're playing tomorrow against the Iowa Wild. As the Springfield Thunderbirds with 2 victories in their last 3 games. A little bit of a heater these last couple of weeks. So I thought perfect time to welcome in the head coach for the Springfield Thunderbirds, former NHLer, and he is the head coach, Steve Konowalchuk. Steve, it is great to catch up with you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So talk to me, Steve, a little bit about what this season has been like for you. Obviously, first season as the head coach for the Thunderbirds and started off a little bit slow, but this team has really picked up the pace in these last couple of months.
Yeah, it's I really like where our team's at the moment. We have, really for the first time, kind of the full roster that we expected at the start of the year. But that's typical for the American League. I mean, that's I guess everything changes real quick with you're dealing with the Blues injuries and you're dealing with your own injuries. And and I think that's a challenge of a coach with the American League is, from day to day you can have a different lineup. And, I think that was the case for a lot of that first part of the season. And I think a bit of the why, I guess, some of the streakiness would be in there. You get kind of guys back, get set in a bit of a groove, and then you lose guys. And then you're trying to, I guess at times, just survive and get some points. But overall, I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the group of players we have, the character we have, and a really good group of young players that are coming through. And, getting Dean and Alexandrov back, sure going to be exciting, too, to give us some more depth.
Steve, that's the part that I find so fascinating, because that's not the way at juniors hockey. That's not the way at the NHL level, to where you've got so many guys coming in and out on top of injuries. You're talking about guys getting called up. How are players susceptible to that? Are players welcoming in terms of accepting different roles throughout the longevity of a season when certain guys are called up or brought to the NHL level?
Yeah, again, it's very important you have the good character in the American Hockey League, and you have the right vets that one are good hockey players and compete and work hard, but also at times have to check their ego in the door while you're playing your young guys in certain situations. And that changes from different points of the season. Obviously everybody still wants to get ice time and the power play and the penalty kill, and where we're at right now, it creates a great competition because we're really deep. We have 4 lines. I talked to our team. We have 4 lines with that any one night can be the first line on the team now. I mean, and down the middle when you got Pekka, Dvorsky, Dean, and McGing, and then Callan even sitting out. That's a really strong middle group that you've got skill on every line, and it's going to create a competition, a healthy competition, and hopefully it'll carry us to some victories here.
Well, Steve, you mentioned Dalibor Dvorsky there, and obviously for Blues fans, he's one of the players down there that they're most excited about. When you look at Dalibor Dvorsky, you can see the goals and points he's put up this season, but when it comes to some of his habits and some of the, play without the puck, what are some things that stand out to you about Dvorsky's game that you've noticed?
Well, first thing, he's a big, strong kid. He's 19, but he's a big, strong kid. So you always want some strength down the middle. His attention to detail away from the puck is certainly, in the V zone and back-checking assignments improved. He takes it serious. So, he's going to be a 200-foot player. He's getting better in that area. And his character is top-notch. Works hard every day, wants to be a hockey player. And then you add on his skill. I mean, he has an elite shot, and he makes some special passes out there as well. So, yeah, it's a good, very good prospect, and he's going to have a good future with the Blues. It's fun to coach him. We're talking with
Springfield Thunderbirds head coach Steve Konowalchuk here on BK and Ferrario. Steve, obviously, when you've got a player in the system of such high expectations, like I'm sure Blues fans have for a young kid like Dalibor Dvorsky, patience is the number one key. But from somebody who's played in the NHL, from somebody who has coached juniors, he's coached in the AHL, is there a certain time or certain something that you see where you feel like a young player has the opportunity and feels like he's ready for the NHL, or is that more just feel as the season goes on?
Well, it's feel, right? It's feel where the game, I think the biggest thing is it's when they get their good stretches or their good games very consistent, right? Where that becomes their base down here to, okay, he's playing a real good game, but now it's 5, 7, 10, 15 games where he's playing on top of his game. Then he's ready for the next step. I mean, you can see with all the young kids, you can see the talent where it's the difference between the NHL and the American League. A lot of it is just being able to do it shift after shift and game after game. And so for me, it's when that level you see it periodically becomes all the time, then they're ready to play in the NHL.
And, Steve, I would imagine you have plenty of conversations with the Blues brass, the front office, the coaching staff in terms of the coaching side of things for the Springfield Thunderbirds. But do you try and implement the same system that the Blues run at the NHL level, or do you try and put a different type of spin on the style that you have in the AHL?
For the most part, we do our own thing down here. D-zone coverage is very similar. I think that's the most important as far as when you get up there, you're not overthinking things. You're not trying to learn a new defensive system in the D zone, and so that's very similar, if not the same. So that the rest of it, the special teams, I think you got to kind of coach to your players, and offensively, a lot of that's instinctual with a few different tweaks. But definitely on the D side, you want to be on the same page as the team up top, just to help the guys when they get called up, that they can go out and play and not be overthinking things.
And Steve, a blue liner with whom Blues fans obviously have become familiar over the last year, plus Matthew Kessel played a huge role in your recent 3-game stretch. Give us a read, if you will, on how much more under control his game may seem at the moment.
Well, that's a good way of putting it. It's, you know, like it's under control in both areas of the ice, and he's really helped our power play as well. Like, pounds the puck, moves it on the offensive blue line on the power play. But for me, for him, you know, no different than you talk about the young kids. It's about just being so consistent and so polished at your game that when you get up there, you're not in and out of the lineup guy. You're a mainstay on a 4, 5, 6 role and become a real good penalty killer to where they can't take you out of the lineup anymore. And he's been really focused. The last 3 games, he's played a heavy game with some physical play when it's there in the D zone. His first pass has been really good to where he's just keeping himself and our team out of trouble. And then, like I say, the stuff offensively is coming. And, you know, again, that last 3 games pretty special. And, you know, I'd like to, you know, if he keeps doing that and making it the only way he plays hockey is that consistent and that heavy and smart puck mover. It's a special player.
Well, Steve, another player that you haven't had a ton of time with yet, but came in, scored a goal in his first game, Otto Stenberg. Just with how Stenberg has performed so far, what has been your first impression relative to what your expectations was with this player coming into your team?
Wow, I had really high expectations because of our rookie camp in the summer, development camp. He was really good, and I was like, wow, too bad we don't get him until the following season because he had a plan to go back to. So I had really high expectations, and I'll tell you what, he's a good hockey player. He's exceeded my expectations, especially for a 19-year-old to come in here mid-season. Sometimes the best compliment you can say is he's just a hockey player. I mean, he goes out, you don't have to coach him. He picks up the systems right away. He's a fast skater. Hockey sense is good. Compete is really good. Like, there's not a moment too big for him. He doesn't care who he's playing against on the other team, which sometimes at the American League can be, you know, a little bit scarier than the NHL because you play the team so many times. He just goes out and plays his game. He doesn't get rattled. Both special teams he picks up no problem. He's going to be a good half-wall power play guy. Elite shot. I'm just amazed how quick he's jumping and being a big part of our team, and credit to him. But he's certainly, he's got a bright future ahead of him as well.
We've got a couple more minutes with Thunderbirds head coach Steve Konowalchuk here on BK and Ferrario. And Steve, just hearing you talk with us today and going back a couple months ago, hearing the interview that you did with Chris Kerber, it does seem like you mentioned character. A lot of these guys have that in the minor league system. From somebody who has played at the NHL level, how important is that style or that element of a game? The talent comes, but when you've got the character in the AHL, it seemingly translates to the NHL faster, doesn't it?
Well, if you're, like I say, like when I talk about, the moment's not too big for you, go out and play, and you're not worried about how you play. Just go play your game, and you're a competitive guy, and you're dialed in. That's what it takes to get to the next level. But it's those kind of players that go on and help your team win championships at NHL level. And Devo and Otto, they're certainly driven, competitive hockey players that are going to be a big part of it. Kaskabaki, we haven't talked about what a special, two-way player he is. That he's good as well. Robertson, another guy, Robertson. He comes in. He's missed, unfortunately, the first part of the year with a groin, but he steps right in and he's helped us a lot lately. So there's just a lot of good young players here that have that, natural compete, that they just go out and play the game and try to play it the right way. There's not anybody that I have to beat on and take pride defensively away from the puck. They all buy in, and it's been a lot of fun for me to work with guys like that.
Yeah, Steve, it shouldn't surprise you. I host the pre and post on the Blues side of things, and pretty much during every intermission or post game, we've got Blues fans texting in, messaging me, asking about certain players playing for the Thunderbirds, and if you've seen how they've performed this well. So there is a lot of excitement for these younger players in the minor leagues. And one more, Steve, if you don't mind, just from a big picture perspective, because you played in the NHL, you've coached on the NHL, you've been on the bench before. Does the style of play in the NHL feel like it's shifted at all in terms of more skill than defense or focus on the other end of the ice? Or is that two-way style always translate to the NHL?
Well, I mean, the two-way style is always how you win championships. That's never changed. You don't win championships without having a collective group of hockey players on a team buying into the two-way style, taking care of defense. And there are some teams that will get points, and you see it, and some individuals gets points. Maybe cheating a little bit in the regular season in NHL, but they don't win the championships. It's the teams that play a complete hockey game, and they fill their roster with complete hockey players that win. That hasn't changed, and I don't think it ever will.
Steve, always appreciate the time, sir. I know you got a busy schedule, a game tomorrow. Good luck tomorrow against the Iowa Wild. Good luck the rest of this season, and look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There you go. Steve Konowalchuk, Thunderbirds head coach. And I felt like it was a good time to get him on because of how much excitement there is for the Blues minor league players, specifically the Dvorskys. You heard him mention Kaskamaki. Glowing reviews about a Matt Kessel that Bradford brought up to him. But I thought that final quote, and really those final two answers from him, Grant, really stuck out to me. The two-way style is always how you win championships. And he talked multiple times about the character of that group down there, saying that the moment's never too big for them in the American Hockey League. And I know a lot of people are going to text in saying it's the American Hockey League, so of course they're going to be able to handle that if they're talented enough. That's not always the case. We've seen guys in the AHL that struggled. Zach Bolduc, for example, last season didn't start off well, got better as the season went along, and then when he got to the NHL, you started to see some of how that talent plays. But look at what Jim Montgomery talks so much about with Zach Bolduc. Well, he's got to figure out how to play away from the puck, because when he gets that, the talent will take over. Just hearing him talk about Dvorsky, Kaskamaki, Matt Kessel, some of these other players that can be players, Stenberg, he was glowing about. You heard him chuckle. Man, that's the element that I feel like this Blues team is lacking right now, of a focused, full group that can handle a big moment in any situation, but also realizes it's not talent that takes over, it's the will to win puck battles that takes it over.
That's what stood out to me most, is anytime you brought up a player, Dvorsky, Stenberg, he said it with Kaskamaki and Robertson. He said they're two-way players.
Yeah.
And the way he talked about Otto Stenberg got me really excited about that player, because he was glowing about Otto Stenberg. And it almost reminds me, the way he talked about Otto Stenberg almost reminds me how coaches talk about Jake Neighbors.
Yeah, it's a good point.
The character side of things.
That's kind of what they said when he was drafted, too. You and I did that draft show when he was drafted in the first round, and a couple of the national analysts were kind of surprised by it, but they said, like, man, you talk about the way he plays, it's a prototypical Blues player.
Right. And so I think, for a lot of people who are excited about Dalibor Dvorsky, I'm almost just as excited about Otto Stenberg. Just seeing what he's done in the World Juniors and hearing how Steve Konowalchuk just talked about him, I think that's really promising. Another player to add to these core players of these prospects that the Blues have.
Yeah, and as dark as it feels right now for the Blues, that's one thing that I've heard multiple people tell me. There's a lot of excitement in terms of what they have in the minor leagues, but that's where the patience comes into play that nobody wants to have when your team is struggling right now. So again, that's Steve Konowalchuk, the Springfield Thunderbirds head coach. If you missed any of our conversation with him, you can go back and check it out after the show today up on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Our podcast presented by Schaefer Door Company. And of course, you can download it, listen live on the 101 ESPN app, which is brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Get it on the Air Comfort Service text line now, though, 314-399-9646. Send us your questions. We'll answer them next on BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.
The Blues play on ESPN.
Shoots, he scores!
Tomorrow night, Blues and Avalanche. Pre-game at 7, puck drop at 8.
The wait is over!
The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
centers.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Saad STL part ways. Good morning. I'm Bradford Brungs. Your Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues have agreed to a mutual contract termination with 32-year-old forward Brandon Saad. He goes on unconditional waivers today, surrendering roughly $5 million in salary. Much more Saad and note-related conversation as our show moves along. Springfield Thunderbirds head coach, meanwhile, Steve Konowalchuk, just joined us for some Dalibor Dvorsky nuggets.
I mean, he has an elite shot, and he makes some special passes out there as well. So, yeah, it's a good, very good prospect, and he's got a good future with the Blues. It's fun to coach him.
This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. We've got the Graveyard Chat as well up on our YouTube channel, 101 ESPN STL. Gators there, Cat Dad Gamers there, Bacon Wrapped Wieners there. Everybody in on our YouTube chat. We call it the Graveyard. Let's get to some of these questions now from the 618. I like how they put urgent with alarm bells next to it to make sure we read it. That's like in emails where like they send you an email.
High importance.
Either that or like you have to put something like, hey, a-hole, for me to open it up. You got to put a good liner on there. So urgent works. It's not as urgent. But will any of the Blues prospects, when they come up to the NHL, be a contender for the Rookie of the Year award? It's from King Chris, the scaffold man. I'm going to say no. Because just looking at it, you got to be somebody who puts up 50 to 60 points in a season. And if I'm projecting forward, the two players that, in my opinion, could do it would be a Snuggerud or a Dvorsky. But where's this team at? Because, like, I look at Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard was 61 points last year when he won it and was a minus 44, which is a joke to me. Ooh. But Connor Bedard was playing like 23 minutes a night. Like, he was their best player on the ice. He was getting number one power play minutes. Matty Beniers from Seattle won it a couple of years ago, 57 points. He's playing in a top six role as a centerman for them. Kirill Kaprizov from Minnesota, who was 23, put 27 goals and 51 points up when he won it. I don't know where Snuggerud and Dvorsky fall in line next season for the Blues in terms of where they're playing at. If they're a top six, a top line player, then they're going to get the opportunity. And then it comes down to, do they have the talent that puts them through? And that I just don't know.
The weird thing for me is that I almost don't really care too much. And no, I don't either. The reason why is because these awards don't focus on the whole player. They just look at goals and points. Like, what did you just say Connor Bedard's plus minus was the year that
minus 44.
Okay. So, like, the amount of complaints that we had with Jordan Kyrou when he was like a minus 30, but he was putting up 30 goals a year is the exact same thing you'd have with a rookie who's putting up those points and goals, but he's a minus on the ice, a minus 40, as you said, with Connor Bedard. So, like, as much as it would be cool to see a Blues rookie win Rookie of the Year, like, it's kind of not even when you look at the whole player. I would much rather have a player that maybe doesn't have 30 goals and 60 points in a year, but is plus 10, plus 15. I'd rather have that player.
Like Jimmy Snuggerud, I think, is the one that people are going to be focused in on. And to put this into perspective, the first year for Matthew Nye's full season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he had 15 goals and 35 points. It was a plus 9. That's not winning your Rookie of the Year, but you know what that did? That proved that you got a top six winger that's going to be good for you who's 22 years old. I'd much rather have that than worry about having a guy who's going to put up 60 points and struggle in other areas of his game. From the 314, guys, who on this roster right now for the Blues is considered untouchable? I would have Holloway. I would have Broberg.
I'd put Kyrou on there right now, which is weird for me to say because I wouldn't have said that 5 months ago.
I can't put Kyrou on there because if you put the right trade in front of me, I would consider it. And that's why, like, Holloway, I'm not going to do it. He's young and he's showing the upside. Broberg, I'm not doing it because look how long you've been looking for a number one defenseman. And I think I would put Parayko on that as well.
He's still the pillar.
Yeah. I think those are the three.
It's hard to call anybody like if Vancouver calls me and they're saying, hey, we're looking to maybe ship off Quinn Hughes, then nobody's untouchable.
Fair. Yeah. No, you're right.
We don't have a player the caliber of Quinn Hughes.
I guess I'm looking at this as like a realistic trade that could take place.
But at this point, that is realistic. They've said that that might be something that happens.
Right.
So, it's a kind of a cop-out. It depends on the answer. But for the average, like, high-end trade, let's say, I would have Dylan Holloway. I'd have Jordan Kyrou. I'd have Philip Broberg. And probably Robert Thomas, but for a high, like say for an Elias Pettersson or someone of that caliber, then I would not put Robert Thomas on that list.
I'd have Parayko in that one too. You're not going to trade Parayko because you're not getting an upgrade over him.
And what's fun about this conversation is that in the last month alone, who jumped to basically the top of our power rankings, if you will? Dylan Holiday. Not that we didn't view him as a core piece, but the transformational nature of the production in the past month alone, he's moved beyond just core status to somebody you really wouldn't want to move.
From 314, guys, if Bregman won 6 years, $200 million or more, granted he's younger, when Nolan Arenado is 3 years, $74 million, Nolan would be cheaper at the end of his contract. My opinion, question, age waits for no one. Bregman will certainly tail off and be getting more money. Morosi said he wants to take on Nolan's salary when the club who wants Bregman will be paying more for the whole contract. So essentially the question is, why wouldn't a team go Nolan Arenado over Alex Bregman? Honestly, their last couple of years. Yes, Nolan Arenado's tailing off, but he's, 34 right now? And Bregman's 29 or 30, if I'm not mistaken?
Early 30s.
So by the end of his contract, teams are probably thinking, we're going to get what Nolan Arenado's doing now for the last year. Whereas I got to deal with 3 years of this for Nolan Arenado. Plus, on top of it, Bregman's a different player.
Yeah.
Arenado is all about the pull, all about the power, and the power has declined. And now you're talking about he doesn't make a whole lot of contact, put a whole lot of power in play. Like, where are you going with this one? Bregman gets on base, makes really solid contact, and doesn't strike out.
Yeah, the barrel rate, those numbers, the percentages, they're troubling, obviously. And this Bregman saga just continues to unfold. It goes on and on. Last couple of days, we've heard, hey, maybe per Bob Nightingale, is Toronto actually interested in amplifying its lineup even further? But Bregman's camp holding out, still holding out. You're holding the cards, I understand it, but for 6 years, a minimum of 150 to 160 million reportedly. That domino isn't going to drop anytime soon. So here we go. It just lingers and festers that much more.
Final one. We got to move Joe Vitale. Joe Vitale is going to join us at 12:15 today. So we'll move, believe it or not, to 12:30. Joey's going to join us at 12:15. But let's wrap up with this one from the 314. Fellas, Nick Leddy was practicing again today. If and when he were to return, what will D pairings look like? So if you missed it, Lou Korak tweeted it out, and I believe Jeremy Rutherford did as well, our Blues insider for The Athletic. Nick Leddy was not practicing. So Nick Leddy was skating today. It sounds like he was skating with the group, but he was an extra. It's not like he was in the pairs or anything, but he was out there for the full team practice. Now, I don't know if he was doing contact drills. My guess is he's not. He's just still ramping up. But let's go down the path that he returns post Four Nations tournament. You and I were talking about this before the show.
Tough.
I don't know where he fits in. Who are you realistically going to and saying you're coming out of the lineup for Nick Leddy? And don't get me wrong, like Nick Leddy, a very veteran presence player who had some success last year. But you going to Ryan Suter and say you're coming out? The Blues would probably say yes because maybe he doesn't get to his performance bonuses, but I'm not going to go to Suter and say that for how well he's played. You're not taking Tyler Tucker out of the lineup because Tyler Tucker has actually taken the step that you were hoping for. The guy that I could make the argument for is Justin Falk. And I don't think they can do that because you've got 5 left-handed defensemen in the lineup. And I know they'll tell you that it doesn't matter. They can play either side. It's going to affect the play at some point when you got 5 left-handed defensemen. So I don't realistically know where he comes in. I guess their probably view is if somebody gets injured, there's the opening.
I think what you probably, and this is what your top 4 probably looks like. I think when Nick Leddy comes back, they are going to probably try to run it back with Leddy and Parayko.
I hate that.
I don't love it either, but I think that's what they're going to try. But here's the thing. I think that would be a short leash. I think if that struggles for 2 or 3 games and it doesn't look good, I think that changes pretty quickly. But I think you go back with Broberg and Falk because you hope to get the same thing out of them that you had, at the beginning of the season. That's worked before. Let's try it again now that we have Letty back. And then, well, I don't know, though. Where would you put Cam Fowler?
I think I would stay Fowler, Parayko. I would push Broberg to the right side with Letty on the left, and then Justin Falk comes out of my lineup.
I think that's...
And then when you feel like he's ready to get another shot, Falk comes back in, Tucker goes to the left side.
I'd love that, but I think that $6.5 million plays.
You're not wrong there, Grant Francis. You're not wrong there. I like this one from the 636. Hey, A-hole, keep up the great work. That's how I read your text on the air. With Grant Francis and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're going to push Joe Vitale back to 12:15. So coming up next, The Athletic had an article today because this Elias Pettersson thing is getting wild. Really, the JT Miller thing. But in the Athletic article, the Blues were brought up. Could that make sense for this team? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN.
Jamie Rivers here, and this week I am giving away a signed Colton Parayko number 55 jersey away. It is awesome. Big old Colt 55, that slap shot from the blue line. Now you can wear the same jersey that he wears, and it's signed. And all you have to do to get entered to win this autographed jersey is go to 101ESPN.com or visit 101, the mobile app powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Start your day with the morning after on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Tim McKernan, Doug Vaughn, and Martin Kilcoy. Listen to TMA weekday mornings from 7 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The morning after is presented by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
So this Vancouver Canucks drama is getting wild. Like, it has been days of our lives for the Vancouver Canucks for I don't even know how long. And for those that don't know, it's Elias Pettersson and JT Miller. They apparently aren't getting along and haven't been getting along for a long time. Last season, JT Miller put up nearly 100 points. I think he surpassed 100 points. 2 years ago, Elias Pettersson put up 100 points. And the Vancouver Canucks won the Pacific Division last year. This season, they're barely scraping by trying to be a wild card team. Pettersson's play has dipped off. JT Miller's play has dipped off. It's been speculated that there's a rift between these two players. This was from the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. Quote, I felt like for a long time that there was a solution here because everybody has worked on it, including the parties involved. But it only gets resolved for a short period of time. And then it festers again. And so it certainly appears like there's not a good solution that would keep this group together. This is the Vancouver Canucks flagship station discussing what's going on.
Oh, boy. Well, first of all, there it is. It's not a media fabrication. It's not made up. It's not us making crap up. This is the president of the Vancouver Canucks, folks. For all those that rip the media, you guys are to blame. You guys make crap up. This is the president saying to you that Miller and Pettersson have had a feud for a long time. They've worked on it. It gets better for a little bit. Then it comes back. It festers again.
Shame on them. I mean, honestly, for the situation they're in and really screwing things up for this franchise.
It is.
So I find it funny that we're, as Blues fans, frustrated with what's taking place. Man, it could be a lot worse with this Vancouver Canucks thing. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because earlier today on The Athletic, Harman Dayal, who we've had on the show before, covers the Vancouver Canucks. And he went through kind of where that team stands in terms of if they were to trade one of these guys, what teams could realistically get involved with it. And one of the many teams, like there was probably 6 or 7 teams that they listed on this, was the St. Louis Blues. And they made the comp in terms of making the trade for Elias Pettersson, if that was the route that they decided to go, is eerily similar to what the Jack Eichel trade was. And for those that don't remember, Jack Eichel was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights for Alex Tuch, who was a established top 6 winger in the National Hockey League, Peyton Krebs, who was a top prospect for them, and they traded a first-round draft pick for Jack Eichel. And that was in November. Here's what Harman Dayal had to say about the Blues. The Blues' best bet to change that might be targeting NHLers in their early to mid-20s instead of waiting for players to hit unrestricted free agents in their late 20s and early 30s. This is what management did last year with the offer sheets to Holloway and Broberg. If Doug Armstrong could keep up his bold streak, Pettersson could be an ideal target given the Blues' long-term need for another top 6 center to complement Robert Thomas. And he went on to talk about how they'll have to first make some cap adjustments, and one of the things he suggested was if they can get out of the Brandon Saad contract. Lo and behold, that happened. So long answer or long-winded way to get to, does Elias Pettersson make sense for the Blues? You're talking about $11.6 million for a 26-year-old centerman who had 100 points 2 years ago.
I think it's absolutely something that they have to consider. When has this team had like a bona fide all-star on their roster? Like
Tarasenko,
you could say
O'Reilly,
Vladdy, but Vladdy wasn't even super consistent with it.
Yeah, the guy to be a perennial.
He was the closest thing they had to an all-star. Yeah, I loved Vladdy here.
Yeah, it's not even an all-star. I think Elias Pettersson would be considered a superstar.
He's a premier player in the league. He is right up there with the top players in the league when he's on his game. Now it's dipped lately, but how much of that is because of this situation with JT Miller and all of the drama that's going on there? I think you absolutely have to consider Elias Pettersson now that you know that he's available. And I think it's important to establish, too, why we're talking only about Elias Pettersson and not JT Miller. It seems like Pettersson is more likely because JT Miller comes with a lot of conditions. Like, he has a no-movement clause. He's 32. Pettersson is 26. Like, there are a lot of different factors that go into JT Miller not being the one that is most likely to be traded here. It does seem like they're leaning more towards Pettersson at this point.
I have convinced myself over the last 24 hours that it makes sense. You know, what Doug Armstrong accomplished this offseason was go out there and get guys that fit into the plan of the future in 23-year-old Broberg and 23-year-old Dylan Holloway. What has he talked all along about when you make moves? You go out there and you get a guy that's in their mid-20s that fits into the timeline of the Blues. Well, this guy's locked up. Yeah, he's locked up for $11.6 million, but you were talking about a superstar in the league and a centerman. When you bring this player in, you're making a massive shakeup because the only way that you're pulling this off is if one of Thomas Kyrou or Pavel Buchnevich are traded away. And in my opinion, Thomas isn't a part of that deal. And I know people have their qualms about Robert Thomas over the struggles in January, but that's a linear move that doesn't make your team any better. You're bringing in a centerman for a centerman who you hope that centerman can become Elias Pettersson, and he's $3 million less. You make the move by trading out something that isn't working for you to bring in something that makes you a stronger team. And that's making a 1-2 punch down the middle of Elias Pettersson and Robert Thomas. So yeah, you're probably talking about a Pavel Buchnevich or a Jordan Kyrou. You're probably talking about one of your top prospects. You're probably talking about this year's first-round draft pick. That's what it would take to pull that deal off. Do I love it? Absolutely not. But there is obviously something gone wrong with the Blues for these last 3 years. You don't have a press conference talking about your top players not performing and saying we're going to be observing because the last 3 years it's been the same issue. That tells me there's going to have to be a shakeup at some point, unless all of a sudden everybody has this come to Jesus moment that it's like, nope, we need to play differently, and then that takes place. And you'll find out if that happens over the next 3 months, if this team really engages into making a push for the playoffs. But this is a major shakeup, and I'm seeing all of the texts coming in on the Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. No way. He's a diva. He's got problems. He's got issues staying mentally focused. Look at how he's played. You don't need another one of those players. I hear all of those arguments. But anything I've listened to is talking about how JT Miller's the problem and the rift between he and Pettersson have gotten bad. Pettersson might be part of the problem. I'm not in that locker room. But one guy's got a no movement clause. The other guy's 26 that doesn't have any trade protection until July 1st that could bring you back a really good return.
And also, JT Miller seems to have problems everywhere he goes. This isn't just an isolated incident with the Canucks. This has happened in the past. From Miller. Here's something else about Pettersson, and I want to read this list off. This is from the article in The Athletic that you referenced. Thomas Durant's put a list together of NHL forwards who have produced between 1 to 1.2 points per game before their 26th birthday while appearing in at least 350 games. This is since 1990. You've got Jeremy Roenick, Paul Kariya, Austin Matthews, Theo Fleury, Pavel Bure, Mitch Marner, Leon Draisaitl, Danny Heatley, Nikita Kucherov, Brendan Shanahan, Mikko Rantanen, David Pastrnak, Mike Modano, Matt Sundin, Ilya Kovalchuk, Jason Spezza, Nathan McKinnon, Nicholas Backstrom.
These are all elite players. These are all elite players. And here's the other thing about the drama that Pettersson has. The same thing was being said about Jack Eichel. The same thing was being said about Sam Reinhart. The same thing was being said about Ryan O'Reilly. He's too much of a whiner. It's not working in Buffalo. Need to get rid of him. What did all three of those players go on to do when they left Buffalo? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying Vancouver's the same as Buffalo because Buffalo has been a joke for about 10 years. Vancouver was in the Pacific Division lead last year and looked like a team that could legit make a push for a Stanley Cup. I always ask myself, what's the problem? What's the problem? Why is this player available? Because 26-year-old 100-point players don't become available. And to me, how the team put themselves in the spot is giving a no-movement clause to JT Miller, and they're trying to figure out how they can adjust. Do I like it? No, I don't. But I think when you're talking about this, it's a major shakeup that the Blues need. And this isn't a major shakeup that you trade a guy and you bring in a fringe top six winger and say, he'll be the answer. No, that's not how you get yourself better. If you trade something from your team that, again, go off of Doug Armstrong's words, it's been the same message for the last 3 years and the same struggles. Who are the same guys that have been here? Kyrou, Thomas, Buchnevich, Falk, Parayko, Bennington, Shen. Like those guys. That's who he's talking about. Some of those guys you can't move on from and upgrade your team. There's 3 guys that you can. The question is, are you willing to pull the trigger on something like that? And do you believe Elias Pettersson? Because this is also a move to play the other side of this. This is also a move that could set your organization back. Because if Pettersson's not a player that you want in the locker room, well, now you just traded away assets and a player that was on your team now and made your team worse. That puts you in a real bind. But this is the risk that you have to take. Carolina just took this exact same risk to go trade for Mikko Rantanen.
The difference in this, so I was just thinking about that. I think this situation almost feels similar to the Matthew Tkachuk trade situation where The team is going to be forced to trade this player. You know that they're going to be trading them. The Canucks are backed into a corner. They have to trade at this point. Like, everybody knows it. Now, if the Blues are going to be in this conversation, is there going to be a team that offers up Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar? Like, is there going to be a team that offers up that level of trade in this? Because if that's the case, the Blues probably aren't players in this. Yeah. But is there going to be a team that does that? That's something that we'll have to find out. Now, there are a lot of teams that have the ability to do that. Like, Utah has a lot. Buffalo has a lot. Yep. Like, you're going up against Detroit teams that have a lot, and that they're probably willing to part with a lot to get a player like Elias Pettersson. Well, that's where it becomes interesting.
And that's one of the texts that just came in. Alex, why would Vancouver trade a centerman for a non-centerman? Well, because if they're making Pettersson trade, JT Miller's their number one centerman. He already basically is playing that number one spot. And what Harmon Dayal said in the Athletic piece is like, yeah, ideally they would love a centerman. They're obviously not getting it offered to them right now. So do you go the next best return? And if you're them, if you're Vancouver, I'm speaking of, if the Blues are offering up a Kyrou or a Pavel Buchnevich, I mean, those are goal scorers. Those are wingers, and they make your team better. So, again, it's a wild premise, but that's where we're at in terms of the major shakeup if that were to have to take place. And sometimes you have to be advantageous when another team gets into a bind themselves. Let's get Joe Vitale's thoughts on this. Radio Blues analyst, also my co-host on our pre- and post-game festivities. Joe Vitale next on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this day back in 2002, the Blues would put 4 up on the Washington Capitals. It would be a heavy special teams game as a total of 9 power plays would take place. The Blues scoring a power play goal thanks to Pavel Demitra. Washington's only goal on the short-handed penalty kill, but Corey Stillman scoring his 13th of the year. 2 for Pavel Demitra and Mike Eastwood with a goal in the third period.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, ClassicAirCare.com. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Along with Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. For those that are wondering where there's BK and no Tanner, BK is on vacation. He was supposed to take vacation on Saturday. His wife got sick, and so they pushed their vacation back a little bit. He'll be back with us next week. And T-Bone, of course, still feeling a little under the weather. Hopefully he'll be back with us tomorrow. But
listed as day-to-day.
Listed as day-to-day. But we got the bullpen here, and the bullpen is just as good. Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns filling in for us. And we're going to head to our Callier and Thompson hotline now and welcome in the fourth man, a part of this program today. He is the Blues radio analyst and the Joe Vitale. Joey V, what's going on, my man? Joey. We're doing this ourselves because there's somebody else.
Wow, that was a little late, fellas. I was waiting for it.
I had to do a little ventriloquist act there, Joe. I had to talk while also talking and not move my lips at the same time.
That's good. No, doing well, guys. Doing really well. Heading over to the airport to hop on the bird to Colorado. Big 2-game road trip coming up for the Blues here this weekend. And other than that, life's been good. A lot of news happening around the league, that's for sure.
There really is, Joe. So let's actually start with the news that we were just talking about, because you and I have talked on the pre and post games about the Vancouver Canucks drama that's taking place right now. And we kind of brought up, because it was in the Athletic article about Elias Pettersson being available via trade. And Harman Dayal, who covers the Vancouver Canucks for the Athletic, he said the Blues could be a team that looks at that if they're looking for a major shakeup. Would you be making any phone calls right now to the Vancouver Canucks because of all of their drama, Joe?
Heck no. Stay away. I'm not a big fan of this trade. There's a couple big reasons. I think Elias Pettersson to me is the one that is more than likely going to be dealt. I'm sure you guys already discussed it, but with some no movement, and for JT Miller, it seems like Pettersson, I believe his no movement doesn't kick in until maybe the summer, if I remember that right. So, it looks like Pettersson will be on the move. I did see the president's comments about how these two just simply can't get along. I mean, listen, when it's hearsay, when it's the media, when it's rumblings, that's one thing. But when your general manager president comes out and says, it's got to be legit and it's got to be something that's got to be taken care of here. So I do expect Pettersson to be traded in a deal similar to the Ranson, another big blockbuster across the league. But, Alex, to me, does this make sense for the St. Louis Blues? To me, no, I don't think so. I think that, kind of what I've gathered from what I've heard about the player, there are some inconsistencies with maybe attitude, inconsistency with play. What's he making? $11.6 million.
Yeah.
I mean, he makes a boatload of money. I mean, I don't know how one player is like him is really worth that. If you look at the McKinnons and the McDavids and the Leon Draisaitl's, I mean, listen, he's just shy of all those contracts. Those are elite premier players that play the full 200 games, that give you everything they got. I just see too many inconsistencies in Pettersson's game. It's crazy that he got that crazy contract. I know he got over 100 points that one year, and he probably deserved it based off that year. But that kind of how things are unfolding, I just don't see him worth that much money. And I think you can put your franchise really behind the eight ball if you bring in a player like that really can't play up to par, which, of course, is the big question right now.
So, Joe, speaking of president of hockey operations talking with the media, Doug Armstrong spoke a couple of days ago, and, of course, we found out Brandon Saad placed on waivers. Yesterday, we found out that they'll mutually terminate his contract. But Doug also had a lot more to say about the play of the team, the top players not being consistent. What were your biggest takeaways from Doug Armstrong's talk with the media?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, from the Saad standpoint, it seems as if everything was kind of figured out way before they decided to put him down on waivers. I would imagine that discussions were had. He did not want to report to Springfield, so the waiver wire, clearing waivers, not reporting, contract termination, that's all was part of the works. And even take a step further, I would imagine that something's in the works for him as he's now an unrestricted free agent to sign somewhere and to continue to pursue hockey in the National Hockey League. So we'll kind of see how that all kind of unfolds here. Whenever a general manager clearly has a discussion of this magnitude in the middle of January surrounding their top players, that's something to raise some eyebrows. And I think that it's certainly a call out for some of their core pieces to figure out a way to turn this thing around. I look at players like Braden Shen, the captain, who is obviously surging. I think he's having a great year. He's been a lightning rod for this piece. I think you look at players, certainly in Kyrou and Thomas, have had great spurts this season. I think, Jordan Kyrou has had, to me, he's been one of the biggest surprises as far as his on and off ice, the leadership role he's taken on. I think he's taken a big step this year from the defensive standpoint. But then there's been inconsistencies at times. Robert Thomas had a great December. January's fallen off here a little bit. I think he's got to figure out a way to get his game going. And at the end of the day, Alex, I think it's just simply a group of young players still. Well, I shouldn't say young, but middle 20 players that, they looked at these guys a couple of years ago and signing those big contracts to say, this is our future. This is the group that's got to get it done. And I think that the general manager is probably not seeing that as quickly as he likes. And, a little bit of a warning shot to try to get them going here.
Joe, you talk about it being a little bit of a warning shot. Is this something that you think is something that you do just one time with a player like Brandon Saad, or is this something that's sort of setting the precedent of, if you're not going to play up to the level we need you to play, we're going to do what we got to do, and that includes potentially putting a player on waivers? Do you think that's something that could be revisited in the future if a similar situation is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Doug Armstrong's a businessman. I think that he keeps the business side separate from the personal side. And this is a business. And this is a team that's been up against the cap for a while now and that has missed the playoffs here for a while. And they're potentially going to miss it again if they don't kind of figure out a way to turn this thing around. So the business side is, you've brought in 3 different coaches. You've had 3 different coaches here in the last a little over a year. Clearly, coaching, you're bringing in Jim Montgomery now, who I think is one of the best in the league. Coaching is coaching, and I think there's been some good spurts and bad spurts, but overall it's kind of staying around this inconsistent, can't figure out a way to put 3 wins together, put a running streak together. So now you look at the players and you figure, okay, well, is it some minor pieces? Is it some bottom pieces? Is it, bottom pair defensemen? Do we need a backup goalie? And I don't think that's the problem. I think that now they're looking at it, well, it's not supplemental pieces, it's core pieces. Which of the core pieces are not fitting in? Which of the core pieces can't figure out a way to get over that hurdle or take on that next step, whether it be a leadership role or finding that consistent game. For Doug Armstrong, is it something as a matter of, the leadership group? Are they too young to take on that leadership group? Are players too quiet when they should be more vocal, things like that. You go back to that 19 Cup run team with O'Reilly and Petro and, Bozak and Maroon and Perron. All these guys were vocal guys. And I think at times, you look at Braden Shen, who certainly is that vocal presence and a great leader. Does he have help all the time? Sometimes probably, and sometimes probably not, where the captain can only do so much. But, this is where quieter guys that are stepping into these leadership roles, this is where they got to step outside their comfort zone and bring that extra level, because as a leader, as a core piece, you realize that it's not just about you, it's about the entire group, and that's what they're still trying to figure out and sort out here.
How tough is it to fix that, Joe? And we're talking with Joe Vitale here on BK and Ferrario. How tough is that to fix if you don't have that as your personality of a player?
Well, you have to figure out a way. Is it something that you can bring this out of him, or is it something that simply you can't bring out of him? And you know what? It is what it is, and you have to figure out, is this going to be a person here for the future? Let's look at a player like Colton Parayko. Colton is naturally a very quiet kid. I've always said that he's a guy that if you have a daughter, one day you want your daughter to marry a person like, Colton, because he's just so generous and so kind. But listen, he's a quiet guy, probably on the ice a little bit too. I think he's a little bit vocal in the locker room, but overall, that's his demeanor. At the beginning, they're figuring out, hey, can we make him into a Chris Pronger type? I think that at times coaches and management tried, and they realized that it's just unnatural for him. Now, Colton doesn't need to be Chris Pronger. I think Colton needs to be exactly who he is. It's that good. And if he is quiet, that's okay. But you see that he's such a good player, let him be one of those quieter pieces. But, if you have a player who is quieter and maybe doesn't want to take on that role or can't give us some assistance to Braden Shen, well, you better make sure your game's up to par. And you better make sure your game's up to snuff. Like Colton Parayko, I think, he's a little bit quieter, but you know what? His game is so good right now, leave him alone. Other players whose games are kind of falling off here a little bit, maybe inconsistent. Well, and if you're not that lightning rod in that leadership piece that this team really needs and supplemental help for Braden Shen, well, that's when you got to start asking yourself questions about, is this someone that can stay, or is this someone that's on the move?
Joe, we'll get you here, get you out of here on this, and we got it on our text line. It says, can you please ask Joey about his poor knife skills in the kitchen? As an Italian, I saw him with Bernie Federko and wasn't that impressed. I haven't seen this video, Joe. Did you have poor knife skills?
Send me that guy's number. If you want to fight, me and him will fight. You want to fight about it? I got knife skills. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, it's this is on the St. Louis Blues YouTube channel. Bernie and I, they're doing like a cooking series. So that was the first one. Bernie's doing like a chicken dip, I guess, for like the Super Bowl. And, he's been making this ever since he stopped playing. I guess when he got traded to Detroit, someone made this for him. And him and his wife, Bernadette, make it a couple times a month, he said. So he walked us through it. I was doing my best Rachel Ray impression.
Nice.
And Apparently my knife skills weren't good, but it's a lot of fun. Go check it out.
There's always one thing I say. Don't ever question an Italian in his knife skills because you won't like the way that ends.
Ever. But I will say, honestly, for people, the recipe itself is absolutely ridiculous. Go on there, watch it. I think they have the recipe in the description. For the Super Bowl, it is the perfect appetizer for Super Bowl. We even got Bernie to make his world famous margaritas. We made a few pictures. We recorded this all at Camo on a Tuesday morning, like around 10 or 11. And after the set was done, we started kind of sharing all the food with the crew and some people that work at Camo. And Bernie's pouring, having a sip and putting it down. And me and Bernie, we're on our like third or fourth. And Bernie, of course, is like, what's wrong with everybody? Doesn't anyone want a margarita? I said, Bernie, it's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. Like, not everyone lives the Hall of Fame life like you, where they can have a margarita at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. So we had a good laugh about it. But wonderful people at Camo V, and it's a fun little series we're doing, so go check it out.
That's awesome. Joe, have a safe trip to Colorado, my man, and we'll talk tomorrow night.
That sounds good, boys. You guys take care, and we'll talk to you next week.
There you go. He's the best. Joe Vitale is headed to Colorado. The Blues take on the Avalanche tomorrow night. 8 o'clock puck drop. Curbs and Joey. I'll have your first Community Credit Union pregame starting at 7 with Joe Vitale. Coming up at 15, we'll get to the junk drawer. Coming up in about 30 minutes, former Blues captain David Backes is going to join us, and a lot of talk about that 2011-2012 team, so I want to get the man who was the captain of that team. He'll join us in about 30 minutes. But coming up next, we sing. Send us your scenarios for Believe It or Not next on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. Check out either the 101 mobile app or 101ESPN.com for your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues captain Braden Shen.
Shen shoots, he scores! Game winner! Bring out the Zamboni!
Get entered to win that Braden Shen signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Saad saga nearing its end point. I'm Bradford Bruns. This Sports Center update is powered by Soliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues have mutually agreed to part ways with forward Brandon Saad. He thereby goes on unconditional waiver shortly after Saad went unclaimed yesterday. Head coach Jim Montgomery addressed said situation.
Our team has lacked consistency, and I always look at the team first, and then, there's individuals that have lacked the consistency. And it's not just Brandon, because he's, been a really good Blue for a long time, and I think his statistics back that up, but it's just a step in the direction of trying to get more ice time for certain players.
That full Fast Lane conversation housed at 101ESPN.com. St. Louis finally resumes play tomorrow against fourth place Colorado. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Soliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
The cowboy hat on.
See, the move was, Grant, actually, all this time you've been thinking who was responsible for taking those hats, but
Grant is like a mix between Fergie and Jesus.
Listen,
I would imagine.
Ooh. Well, Fergie on the national anthem, or
no, not Fergie on the national anthem. No, that's typically me or BK on the national anthem. But it is, believe it or not, today here on BK and Ferrario. That's right, we get it done even without T-Bone and BK. You send us the scenarios to our Air Comfort Service text line. We will tell you if we are going to believe it or not. 314-399-9646. Also over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Fellas, believe it or not, the Blues trade for Elias Pettersson. And I'm asking this because I know we just talked about it, but now you just heard Joe Vitale, Blues radio analyst, who also spent a lot of time in the National Hockey League, saying, hell no.
Yeah, he just kind of crapped all over it.
It's okay. He does it a lot.
Do I want that to happen? I do. Do I think it's going to happen? No, so I'm not going to believe it.
I can't believe it either, and it's not for lack of intrigue, obviously. We've talked about yearning for those perennial superstars for years on end, obviously, but there are too many parameters, there are too many variables, I think, in the equation right now. This would be a seismic move, roster-wise, the likes of which we simply haven't seen. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I will definitely entertain it. I won't be as emphatic with the denial as Joey.
Man, I'm going to not believe this because I don't think this is the big swing that they take, although I have convinced myself that it would make sense for this team. Joe's right. And the one element that he said of why you don't do it is the same reason why you've got guys that are struggling right now. Players that aren't comfortable with taking over a leadership role when things aren't well. You don't need more of those guys. Like, you're trying to fix that problem now. You want to bring in a dude who is a part of the leadership core, and that team is fumbling massively. It's a little skeptical.
Yeah, and thinking about what Joey said too, like if, for example, Carolina decided to not trade for Mikko Rantanen and instead trade for Elias Pettersson, that would make more sense, I think, because you're taking Pettersson and you're bringing him into a core that's already established and a culture that's already established. You bring him into the Blues where obviously the main problem in the main core right now is soul searching and trying to find their culture and their consistency and their habits. that might not be a recipe for success when you think about it that way.
Grant, what do you got for us today?
All right, believe it or not, now that the Blues have some more cap space with Brandon Saad no longer being on the team, they end up bringing in some cap this year at the trade deadline.
Like taking on money? Like being the middleman? Or taking in a player with salary?
They bring in a player.
I'm going to say not believe this. I think Doug is now in the cautious state. I think they threw a lot of money this offseason at certain areas because they believed this team could push for the playoffs. And now that they don't have that same feel, which I don't know about you guys, but hearing Doug Armstrong talk, it sure didn't seem like he had the feeling that the team was making a push for the playoffs this year. You're not going to go bring more money in. Right now, you've gotten off $5.5 million, like $4 million in terms of cash flow. I don't know if you justify that if this team doesn't make like a unheard of run between now and March 7th. So I'm going to say not believe this. I think they stand pat or sell more.
So basically, are they moderate buyers? I don't really know if I can make that leap because, Alex, I'm with you insofar as it feels as though we talked about it yesterday. The official Saad move, that was the opening salvo. Okay, what else lies ahead? I simply don't think you're in a position right now to be able to take on more assets, to take on any degree of salary, even though I think we've talked about the next, obviously, 3 months, extended run throughout the rest of the regular season, but to me, the next 4 games as well, in particular, in a vacuum, when you're talking about Colorado tomorrow, and then you have heavy hitters in Edmonton and Florida playing on the road next week, that's going to give you a lot of answers sooner rather than later.
Bradford, what do you got?
All right, guys, reports circulating earlier that ESPN will pick up its option to keep broadcasting ACC sports through 2036. Never mind that Clemson and Florida State still have ongoing lawsuits against the league. That's immaterial, I guess. But believe it or not, the ACC will once again have 2 bids, 2 schools represented in the college football playoff next season.
Okay.
Will they still be as relevant? I have my doubts.
Yeah, I do too. I think Notre Dame's going to be there. The real question is, who's that next team? And I'm going to go with my gut, because I said I think Bill Belichick's going to make that team effective this year. So I'm going to say believe it. I think 2 teams get in, and those 2 teams are Notre Dame and North Carolina.
I like it, Grant.
Ooh. I don't think North Carolina's going to take that far of a step.
You shut your mouth.
That fast.
Bill Belichick is going to come in and rally the troops.
Hey, Florida State was almost there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was fake. That was also because they, had studs in certain areas.
I'm not going to believe this. I think it was surprising this year that they had the teams that they had play as well as they did. I think it's going to be back to 1.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's going to be either Clemson or SMU again, going to come down to that ACC championship game.
Yeah, especially with the Seminoles suddenly not looking relevant whatsoever. I don't believe that SMU, what you saw last season, was a mirage, but I need to see it again as far as building that program. I don't think that automatically, because Jennings returns a quarterback, that suddenly you're penciling that team in as the second. And we all know that Dabo, for years now, on end, he has consistently pushed back against the portal, right? Those Tigers do not wade into those waters. So when you're doing that, when you're resistant and you're relying on just developing the players and the top recruits you've brought onto campus, I think it's a slippery slope. And Clemson, frankly, surprised a lot of people by just qualifying in 2024. So I'm not buying it.
Book it, boys. 12-0. Bill Belichick with the Tar Heels this upcoming season.
Real quick, Cam Ward's done, right? At Miami?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about Miami then.
From the 3-1-4, believe it or not, the Cards surprised everyone and finished with more wins than last year. They had 83 last season. Not believe it. I think at best you're an 80-win team. At worst, you're probably 75. So I'm not believing this.
I can't believe it either. And it's not exactly because, the NL Central is absolutely stacked from top to bottom. I think we'll get into this more during the rest of the week on the show. But rather, I still don't believe that you have necessarily replaced the necessary, requisite production even of a Paul Goldschmidt near the middle of your order. And hear me out on this one, because until proven otherwise, until we actually see Lars Nootbaar for more than 116 games, until we actually see Jordan Walker consistently hit hit for power, hit period at the major league level. You are banking on the likes of a Wilson Contreras. You hope that there's going to be more health and that you can put him at first base and rely on that. But can you really necessarily say that, oh yeah, Ivan Herrera, if he is the guy, he's going to replicate what Contreras did at the plate? Paul Goldschmidt last season, for all of the struggles, all of the nitpicking, he still led this team in home runs. He led this team in multiple offensive categories. Have you necessarily improved in that regard? In pitching, we all know that that's still going to be a big bugaboo. You're relying on Palante to be the same guy. Is McGreevy going to make the move? The bullpen, I don't think it can be better, therefore not as many wins.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it as well. There's way too many question marks there to put any faith into them getting back to there, so no.
Believe it or not, from the 314, Jordan Binnington waives his no-trade clause at the end of this season. First off, Jordan Binnington doesn't have a no-trade clause. He's got a modified no-trade clause. This year he's got 18 teams. Next year he's got 14 teams. The following year he's got 10. Not believe it, because they're not going to ask him to waive it. I don't know about you guys, but Joel Hofer has not shown me that he's ready to play 50 games for you in a season.
No, and I don't think the team has any aspirations of trading Jordan Binnington. I know sometimes fans can get a little bit disappointed with the goaltending, and at times it is inconsistent. That's a fair critique, but for what Jordan Binnington has been, especially in the big moments, like once this team gets back into the playoffs, which I honestly thought it would be this season,
I did too.
But especially given the fact that I thought it was going to be this season, I really think that by next season, you're going to be in the playoffs. I think you want Jordan Binnington there in that kind of moment.
Let me ask you guys this. The best return on trade, do you think it was last year or this year? Like if they were to trade him last year versus this year, which one would have had the better return?
It would have been after last year.
So why would you trade him now?
I agree.
Yeah. Why would you trade him now? The league probably would view it as, he's struggling. Okay. I'm sure there's a lot of teams, though, that know his prowess in the playoffs and say, we'll put him in front of our defense, we'll be good. No, you're not trading that, because you trade that, boy, you got even more issues next year than worrying about your goaltending. Like, yeah, your goaltending maybe hasn't been as good as it was last year. I hate to break it to you, but your goaltending was elite last year. And I understand the people that don't believe Jordan Binnington is elite. Fine. He's proven it right now. But when he is on his game, you saw what he could do last year. Imagine what it looks like with a better team in front of him. Believe it or not, Nolan Arenado will actually go off this season for the Cardinals. They'll abandon the youth movement plan and get aggressive to try and compete again.
Define going off. Are we talking about that career year?
Going off for him would be 15 home runs this season.
That would be nice. How about the runs batted in, period? And regardless of whether, let's just concede right now, say that he is going to be in place in spring training, he's reporting, and you enter the regular season with him as the guy at third base. He's going to be peppered by and surrounded by a number of young core cast contributors. So I would rely more on what we're actually seeing as far as some of those advanced analytics. Okay, are you actually seeing a little more pop coming off of the bat? Is he driving the baseball once more? I don't care if it's 12 home runs, 15 home runs, 20 home runs, 25. If he's driving in the runs and guys ahead of him in the order, i.e. Mason Wynn, maybe even a Burleson, depending on how regularly he plays, if they are getting on and putting him in a position to drive them home, we need to see an uptick, obviously, in the production with runners in scoring position. But that's what I want to see. I don't want to put necessarily an exact number on it, but I do feel as if he is basically there and he is allowed to prepare accordingly in spring training, and this albatross has been lifted as far as, are you moving now? Are you moving in the next couple of months? You will see a more relaxed version and somebody who is able to, I'm not going to say recapture the 2022 form, but a more representative version of that player.
I think Arenado is just going to be fine this year. And that's not just for, if he's on the Cardinals or not. I think that's just in general, wherever he's at. I think he's just going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be an all-star this season. So I'm not going to believe it. I think he'll be fine.
Believe it or not, the Eagles lose the Super Bowl and fire Nick Sirianni.
Oh, well, I'll believe the first part, not believe the second.
Yeah, two-parter. Two-parter. I wouldn't say that he's endeared himself suddenly to the city of brotherly love, but it looks a lot better now, i.e. when you are consistently giving the ball to Saquon Barkley. You'll have your predictions, obviously, next week, Alex, with BK, but at the same time, Sirianni does seem to be somebody who absolutely is reliant on a lot of the talent evaluation the front office there has constructed. The makeup of that roster, it's as good as any in the NFL, and basically you're just handing him the keys to the kingdom and saying, don't mess it up. So I wouldn't be surprised if in another year or so, maybe when some of that production from Saquon is tailing off, that we're in the same predicament, but not after the Super Bowl.
Has a coach ever been fired immediately after making it to the Super Bowl?
That's a good question.
I would have to doubt it.
Guarantee it's happened, right?
Immediately thereafter, boy.
Like that offseason, I would have to doubt it.
Retirement, but
retired,
fired?
yes, but fired, I wouldn't think so.
I can't recall immediately.
Yeah, I can't think of one. I'd have to like search that and see if there's ever been there. A couple of others. Believe it or not, this will be believe it or not, that's the segment we're in. This will be the final year that Nick Leddy and Justin Falk play for the Blues.
So one of them are gone or both of them are gone this offseason?
Both. It says both. But we can also go down the either.
I would say that I think, man, that's hard. With the way Army has been so aggressive, with this past offseason and even this season and what he just did with Brandon Saad, I would not be surprised at all if he gets out of one of those contracts, whether that be through trade or whether it be similar to what they just did to Brandon Saad.
Yeah.
So I'll believe that one of them are going to be gone. I don't think both, but I'll believe one of them.
Yeah, I'll believe one of them. Because if the defense and the team still underperforms, I could see them saying, nope, this wasn't good enough. And we've got Matt Kessel, we've got Tyler Tucker, we've got Broberg, Fowler, Parayko. We'll move on. The question's going to be who, because Falk will have 2 years remaining at 6.5. Leddy will have 4, and then it really comes down to how do they perform as they wrap up the regular season. Final one here. Believe it or not, one big name retires from the Chiefs after the Super Bowl. So I'm assuming they mean big name Travis Kelce, Andy Reid.
I like this one.
I'm going to say believe it because I think Travis Kelce retires.
I don't. I think if they win the Super Bowl, I think they'll go however long. Like, if you're on a three-peat, why not go for 4? I think he'll retire once they lose one.
I think 2 words, Taylor Swift.
I mean, maybe.
Andy Reid, I'm with you. Like, Andy Reid, screw that. I even asked BK this earlier this week, and he said, no, Andy Reid wants to go down as the best coach in the NFL history.
Yeah, he's pursuing Don Shula territory.
Yeah, and so if I'm him, I'm bringing it. If I'm Kelce, I got 3-peat. I don't need it. My legacy's there. I'm already a Hall of Famer, and I'm married to somebody who's going to make a ton of money for the rest of my life. I'm good.
Boy, that's a tough one. That's a good prop bet. I'm not going to believe it, though, because I do think actually, and all of these different elements, of course, are subject to change, but he's going to honor the contract. He has one more season there, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe that brotherhood with Patrick Mahomes, maybe it sounds trite, maybe it sounds cliche, it is so strong. He loves playing that combination so much that I do think he will be able to eke one more year of production and premium production at that out of him in the postseason. And so many of the other core individuals, think about it, guys, they're pretty much young. They're still on the ascent, with the exception of a Chris Jones who is maybe moving toward the back half. But in McDuffie, he has so much time to go, along with a Bolton. That defense still largely young. I just don't see it.
Hey, real quick from the Air Comfort Service text line, shout out to them. They brought up Jimmy Johnson.
Who
was fired by the Cow. Well, not fired, technically a mutual agreement to split
Jerry
after
Jones
1994 when they won the Super Bowl.
That's a Jerry Jones move. I should have actually thought of that one.
Mutual terminations. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Graham Francis, Bradford Bruns. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in about 10 minutes, David Backus. But next, our junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
This Saturday morning at 10:30, it's a college basketball doubleheader on ESPN. Game 1, Tennessee and Florida. Game 2, Duke and North Carolina. The NCAA plays on 101 ESPN. St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
All right, let's get into the junk drawer. We've got David Backus, former Blues captain, longtime NHLer. He's joining us in about 5 minutes or so. But in our junk drawer segment today, boys, I have a list, and I love lists. Both you guys video game players?
Are you BK over there? That was the presumption last year. Do you remember that on the remote?
No, I don't remember that. But did I say it, Tony? I didn't say it, Tony. Did I?
Tony, but he always has his list.
Yeah. Well, he does have his list. I do love lists, though.
Sports games, give it to us.
Yeah, so it's best sports video game franchises. Now, I'm going to give you, it's a top 14, I think it is. So I'm going to give you the bottom 4, and let's see if you guys can guess the top 10. So 14 on this list is EA NHL Sports. No surprise there. NHL doesn't get a whole lot of love. Tiger Woods, PGA, is 13th. Madden is 12th. That surprised me.
That can't be right.
I know. This one's from Book It Sports. Mario Kart is...
Mario Kart is sports?
I guess it's considered sports. Racing? I don't know. 11th,
Variation.
and then 12th, and then Rocket League is 11th. I don't know what Rocket League is.
Oh, Rocket League is fun.
I've never played Rocket League.
It's not a sport, though. Like, you're driving cars around. So it's basically like...
It's a made-up sport.
It's basically like soccer. Like, you have a soccer field, and you have cars driving around trying to hit a ball into the net. That's basically what... It is fun, but it's not really a sport.
Yeah, so those are 14 through 11. So now that I gave you those, can you guys guess top 10?
Let's see. MLB, definitely.
The show
way up there
is 5th on this list.
NBA 2K.
NBA 2K is 2nd on this list. That one makes a lot of sense. We don't feel it here, but there's a lot of basketball fans.
This is an easy one. FIFA.
FIFA is actually number 10. Yeah, I thought FIFA would have been like significantly higher.
Is this worldwide or just nationally?
It doesn't say. It just says the best sports video game franchise.
It's got to be number 1 in the world.
Totally. I have to imagine.
This has to be a United States list then.
Yeah. Okay, we're being pretty generous.
Sorry,
with
U.S.
the rules here. So I'll take a shot in the dark since you involved racing. What about a Gran Turismo?
So Gran Turismo is not on this list. Kind of one of those. I thought that one or like Need for Speed would be on there.
Is there a NASCAR video game on there, though?
There's not a NASCAR video game. The only racing was Rocket League and Mario Kart, which if we're going to call Mario Kart racing.
I used to have a NASCAR game. It was fun. I'd drive backwards and just cause havoc.
So number 9 on this list is NFL Street. I guess that's just the street franchises, because didn't they have an NBA Street too?
Well, it was very comparable. So basically the equivalent of NBA Jam.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of what it was. NBA Jam was my ish growing up.
We didn't mention the college football one. Is that one on there?
College football is number 1 on this list.
New edition, boy.
Yeah, college football is number 1 on this list. Wrestling is number 8 on this list. So we said MLB The Show, which was number 5. Number 6 is MVP Baseball.
I haven't heard of that.
I don't remember that one.
I vaguely remember.
So your top 4, Wii Sports.
Oh, okay. I forget about Wii. It's
although like the Wii hasn't. I mean, maybe somebody out there that still plays it, but I don't feel like people have touched their Wii in probably like 5 or 6 years.
Can I get a Wii Sports Resort?
Wii Sports Resort. That one's not on there. I'm assuming it falls into the same line. Number 3 on this list, and one that I probably played until it was broken, was Tony Hawk.
Oh,
that one makes a ton of sense. If you're going off of like sales, Tony Hawk had to have been top 5 for
nostalgia, baby.
Productive that was. And then you guys mentioned the top 2, NBA 2K, and then NCAA football was number 1.
Alex, quick question for you. MLB The Show, the latest edition being unveiled, of course, shortly. So your cover subjects, just saw this yesterday, as a matter of fact. Paul Skeens, no surprise there. Ellie De La Cruz, no surprise there either. Number 3, I believe, if you're going with the trio, could be open for debate a little bit. I'm not going to have quibbles about Gunnar Henderson, but if you had to basically make up the cover subjects or decide on the cover subjects for Major League Baseball, let's, I don't know, encompass a number of different sports. Who would be your prime guys you're putting out on that cover right now?
For different sports?
Sure.
Well, NFL for me would, if we're going like young guys, NFL's Jaden Daniels. Like I would just plan on the new Madden cover to be Jaden Daniels. NBA, I guess has to be.
It's Wemby, right?
Wemby
Moving
or
forward.
Gilgeous Anderson, Alexander from.
I like that.
From Oklahoma City.
See, who would be NHL this year? Because, I mean, you could say Connor
Celebrini,
McDavid,
probably.
Yeah,
or
Celebrini's a good one.
Michkov's kind of trailed off a little bit, but yeah, I would say
Celebrini's a good one.
if you're going off of young player, it would be Celebrini because Connor Bedard was all the phase last year, and obviously that fizzled out pretty quick. But yeah, it's probably the way you'd go through that one. With Graham Francis and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. So now I just brought all your nostalgia video games back. We had like 3 of those on the Air Comfort Service text line. Thanks a lot, Ferrario. I don't get home till 4 o'clock to get to go play a video game. Well, you're welcome. Just something to
play the Wii now.
Just
a few people have said on the text line that they touch their Wii every day still.
Well,
so
that's a different type of Wii. And I don't think you can play games on that.
I don't even know where mine is anymore.
You don't know where that is anymore? Oh, well.
I have it somewhere.
I sold mine to a thrift store.
How much you get for it?
Not much, like $15. I'll let you fill in the rest of that statement that I just made.
To excuse myself.
Yeah, Bradford will have to dump that last 2 minutes. Graham Francis, Bradford Bruns. We'll talk to David Backus, former Blues captain, next on 101 ESPN.
Open up your 101 mobile app for your chance to win a signed Bennington Blues mini goalie mask.
What a save by Bennington.
It's a cool miniature mask autographed by Blues goalie Jordan Bennington.
Do I look nervous?
Check it out and get entered to win it right now, either online at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app, powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
We want to hear from you. Use the Scott Lee Mic Drop feature on the 101 mobile app. Give us your opinion on anything St. Louis sports with a mic drop.
Brought to you by the Scott Lee Heating Company.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
David was a guy that did it willingly and embraced it all the time. He was a great salesman for what I was selling. You can't say anything that's better about a player when you have a player that's that bought in, that's committed. I really appreciated it. He did a lot of the dirty work that a coach needs done with his leadership group and his captaincy. He did a lot of the dirty work inside the locker room, on the ice, during practices. He did a lot of that work that we needed, that was necessary for us to build really good teams. But I really liked our disposition. I really liked the way that the players were selling each other, and I was doing less and less coaching and more guiding.
That's the voice of former Blues head coach Ken Hitchcock on the recent episode that the Blues put out of Life as a Blue. And I pulled that specifically because our guest now was Ken Hitchcock's captain his first year when he took over for the Blues. He is David Backus joining us on our Callier and Thompson hotline. And, of course, a lot of discussion now about the Blues, the struggles that they've been going through, the ups and downs, attempting to try and get that buy-in from the entire team. It's something that David Backus was a part of. David, it is always a pleasure to talk with you, man. Thank you so much for taking some time out of the day. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, David. So let's jump into it if you don't mind, going back. And I know we're going back to that 2011-2012 season. But when I heard that piece from Ken Hitchcock talking about, look, when we had David, he was the best spokesperson for that team to take what he was trying to preach and implement it into that roster. For a team that started off tough, Ken Hitchcock comes in 13 games in. What clicked for that group once Ken Hitchcock took over?
Well, there's a continuity that needs to occur between from the GM to the coach to the captain of the leadership group. And that is, when that's continuous and consistent, there's no mixed messaging and no way to decipher or to get off the page from what's been presented. And Hitch was very clear in his expectations and willingness to hold players accountable to what his demands were. And that made it, I guess, easy for me to know what I was expected to do first and be an example of, but then demand of the leadership group and everyone else that fell in line after that.
So when you look back on that season, David, of course, the Blues, you were a part of a team that made the playoffs a few years prior. They were kind of in and out. But you've referenced in the past, the inability to get it done in the playoffs kind of started to leak in frustration with that group. Was that part of why it was so easy for that group to jump in immediately and embrace what Ken Hitchcock was trying to sell because of the desperation to get back into the postseason?
Well, there's certainly a pedigree of player and quality of player on the, rebuild curve of what we started with when, I got to St. Louis in 2006 and first overall picks, which means your team's not very good at all, to then where we were when Hitch took over and on our way up, and we had made a couple playoffs, learned some lessons. And then as far as message being sent, I think what he wasn't afraid of is he wasn't afraid of the players as far as holding them accountable. So if it's Vladimir Tarasenko that thinks he's going to get out of a shooting lane, even though he's a 40-goal scorer, he's going to be held accountable in the same way that he would expect Scotty Upshaw to get in the way of a shot from the point and block it and buy into the team first mentality. Finishing hits, he was very clear that all he would expect from you is everything you had. And to me, anytime I'm doing anything, even with my kids now, that's my expectation. But in professional sports, I guess in my mind, that was a given. Unfortunately, there's that doesn't happen every shift, every minute that you're playing hockey.
And that obviously is the difficulty in the NHL now, I would imagine, David, where you have a lot younger players that are coming from junior hockey, coming from the college level into the NHL and expect things maybe a little bit easier than what it was. And you saw all of that during your time at the NHL level, but specifically for the Blues, what were those conversations like when you were trying to get the buy-in from the younger players that were stepping into a group that had already kind of established something?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, this is not just an evolution in hockey or in professional sports. This is an evolution in society and in America and in North America. And I'm not knowledgeable enough about the rest of the world, and maybe this is me just being an old curmudgeon-y, trusty old dude, but the work ethic and the resiliency and the character of generations following of whatever it takes. Like I went to lunch with a neighbor today, and he told me about growing up on a tobacco farm and how hard work you're just expected to do, and there's no other way around it when you grow up on a tobacco farm. I didn't grow up on a tobacco farm, but to me, there's some life lessons that are instilled by doing it the hard way, especially at a young age, that then permeate the rest of your life and are, serve you well for the rest of your time. I feel like that, I started to see that maybe in my later years in St. Louis, but I still think the core guys in the league this year or these days need to be of that old school ilk of a Braden Shen type of player that is willing to, get dirty, get ugly, do the hard things, not take any shortcuts, toe the line, and be the first out of the foxhole when it's time to make the charge. And, I think he does one heck of a job as a captain, but just as important as the first guy out of the foxhole is the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And all of a sudden you've got some momentum that everyone else is falling out of that foxhole. My guys were Alex Pietrangelo and Alex Steen. And while we all didn't agree on everything at all times, when we had our most success, we were most in sync and most speaking the same language and pulling the rope in the same direction. And that's simple leadership and how to, try to get a group to be bought in and completely on the same page in anything you do. Professional sports, especially in the playoffs in the NHL, it's critical and crucial just to get there, let alone to dispatch some of the teams, especially the teams we were playing as we were getting into the playoffs, and you play the LA Kings or the Chicago Blackhawks every year in the playoffs. You go 7 games with one of those teams and you lose. It's a huge disappointment because you didn't get out of the first round, but then they go on to win the cup and just absolutely abuse every team on their way to it. And you talk to them in the summer and they say, the games we played against you were, maybe the hardest series of our playoff run. And you're like, okay, we do have something here. Just how do we, come out on the other side of that game 7 to then, get to that next level and maybe not be playing Chicago or LA when they're at their absolute tip top, peak of their rebuild and their cycle of being perennial contenders.
We're talking with David Backes, longtime Blues captain here on BK and Ferrario. And David, when you're talking about getting everybody to pull on the same rope, and when you speak of Steen and Alex Pietrangelo, in the early days it was Barrett Jackman, we hear a lot of that from Jim Montgomery right now, who's trying to get the team to embrace the Blues culture, that work boots mentality of going out there every single shift and playing it's like it's last. Is that the toughest element, though, as a player, as a leader in the locker room, to try and achieve, is get everybody on the same page?
Most certainly. And when that page, especially in today's day and age, as we've already talked about, maybe generations that follow, some entitlement or some selfishness, again, I will circle back to some of the guys that I played with, and we didn't always see eye to eye, but you could never second guess Alex Steen's commitment to every shift that he played, or, everybody down the lineup. When it was time to go, it was time to go, and they were all in on trying to win every shift. I was at the Winter Classic, and I saw, again, Braden Shen, in a game that's out of control, he's willing to answer the bell to Foligno. And to me, those are rallying times where if I'm some of the younger guys that don't like to get down and dirty, like I'm buying that guy dinner, even though he makes more money than me next time I can, and trying to, siphon a little bit of courage or appreciation or, team concept of like, I saw what you did. That's maybe not my forte, but I'm appreciative of it, and we need more of that. Or, gosh, what would that be like if I participated in that and got a little dirty as a more of a skill player? And not that it has to be a fight, but the Blues trademark for eons has been blue collar. We're going to outwork you. We're going to lay everything out there, and sometimes we won't win, but every time we show up, you're going to know that you played a game against a hard-nosed team. And to me, those are foundational aspects of a team that has success in the NHL.
Well, David, when you're talking about all those things and, you're having these conversations with a player, how long do you wait it out until you're like, okay, this guy just isn't going to get it anymore? Like it's just not just going to resonate with him.
Yeah, my patience level certainly wasn't what it is today now that I have kids and I have to tell them 100 times before they, comply with one request. And I do think it was different back then. Like, there was a lot to be made out of me going after Vladimir Tarasenko in a practice when he was our leading scorer, and he's got 80 points, and everyone loves Vladdy, which one heck of a player, no question about it. But there were times when Vladdy got selfish, and whether that was he didn't know because he wasn't told or it's not the way he was brought up, he needed to buy in to the St. Louis Blues culture, and we were team first. And then you can let your dazzling shot or ability to, take over a game, let it happen. But first, you need to know what's required of every guy in this room, and it's have a conversation with them, show it on tape, talk with the coach. What can we do? Can you pull the lever of a little less playing time? And back then, the guy would get mad maybe and respond. And Vladdy was really good actually at like, if anything was taken from him, power play or, he missed a shift because of this, that, or the other thing, there's an anger response where you go out there to try to prove someone wrong. More so now, it's a pity party, and then your agent's calling the GM, and it's like, that's just not the adult way to take care of things. The adult way is to pull up your boots and to, answer the bell and just be better. And that's difficult to have ingrained in the culture. When I went to Boston, I would say that was in the culture a bit, but just with the top-end players that were playing a lot and that were feeling appreciated for their contributions because they were huge names. And the bottom six guys were just more of like accessory pieces. But once the whole group felt like they were part of a bigger team, now you've got that same sort of buy-in, and you're plug and play when those guys get, called up from a third, fourth line role because of injury or for whatever else reason, and they get more opportunity. They're A, prepared for it, but B, feel like they're already part of the crew and they're willing to do whatever is required of them at that moment to have the team success. And, Anaheim was a bit more of a challenge when I got there with a culture. I mean, Ryan Getzlaf was really old school, but it's tough because he was really on an island with without Corey Perry or Pat Maroon or some of the old guard that they had there. He was getting out of the foxhole and looking back, and everyone else was, in the fetal position a lot of the time because they didn't want to invest what he was willing to invest in the game. And to me, it kind of showed three steps on the how do you get buy-in, how do you build culture, and if culture, like Anaheim was a great team in the Western Conference for a long time, really hard to play against. But if you don't reinforce that and have the right crew continuing to make sure that's perpetuated generation after generation, it erodes and you start back at square one, which is likely pouring a footing to then put your first course of bricks on. And it's not, culture is in business, in athletics, in family life is not something that you snap your fingers. This is a repetition after repetition, example after example exercise that takes a long time to build, can get torn down a lot quicker than it can get built. And once you lose it or it starts to erode, it's really tough to turn it around again.
Well, when you're having these difficult conversations of culture and buy-in, obviously you see in the NHL on some teams like personalities clash. I mean, you're seeing it in Vancouver right now. But when you're having these difficult conversations, how as a captain do you sort of ride that line of having the conversation and getting a positive reaction and outcome for the team, and having the conversation and then sort of the locker room having issues because of those conversations?
Yeah, I would say what I find most shameful about a situation like in Vancouver is just how public it's become. For me, there's a hierarchy chart of when that message comes down from GM to coach to captain to leadership group to the, all of the players, there's also a feedback loop that goes the other way. And Army was good at it. They were excellent at it in Boston, where if there was a guy not buying in, not participating in team bonding activities, not his wife was being such a disruption that it wasn't awesome in the wives' room and it was becoming a distraction for the players, that feedback came back up the channel, and that guy was gone no matter how great he was at, ice hockey and contributing on the ice. If he wasn't a team first player or willing to assimilate to the culture, that was kind of the, I don't want to call it the nuclear option, but it was more of, you're trying it yourself, you're trying to build, you're trying to, take this guy out for dinner one-on-one, see what makes him tick, see if you can encourage him or incentivize him in conjunction with the coaching staff to be like, this dude's a great player, but if we could get him incentivized however we need to, he could be a game changer every single night. Can we get to that point, or can we take this guy from a bubble player if he's in and out of the lineup to making a difference every night? And every bit of those incremental changes really matter for a team. Personal conversations, taking him out for dinner, have his family over for an outing and connect on a family basis, escort him to the team bonding activities on the road or going out as a group. And having that shared experience goes a long way when you're looking at each other on the bench of like, boys, it's time to buckle up. Or now I've got some equity with him that when he's not doing what he's supposed to do, I can get down his throat a little bit, and rather than puckering up, he'd be like, all right, I respect that dude. I know that dude. He just wants me to be better so we can be better, and I got to lock it in, and I got to be better. And all of those things, along with, if that doesn't work, I need a efficient channel back to the top to where that guy's removed before. Like, these guys in Vancouver are excellent players, but they have to have their value diminished in a great way, knowing that one of them's got to be removed from the situation for them to have success again. And that, to me, is just the shame of the situation.
David, you truly are the best, man. Thank you so much. Before we let you go, I know so many people here in St. Louis are still tied into your group, Athletes for Animals. Anything new going on with that?
Continuing to raise money and get it out to groups that need it in such a bad way. After everyone had to go back to work after COVID, the shelters are really flooded with animals that needed to be adopted. So adopt, don't shop, and we're continuing to find efficient ways, along with some great partnerships with ProPlan. St. Louis-based Purina, they've been so good to us. We just couldn't be more grateful and happy to be helping animals all across the country. So thanks for the plug.
Yeah, absolutely. That website is athletesforanimals.org. David, you're the best, man. Thank you so much for the time, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Ask anytime. Cheers.
There you go. David Backus. I mean, he truly is a gem. I love the opportunity to get to talk to him and pick his brain about the league, how it's been, how it is now. Like, this is a guy who, I mean, he's got 2 young kids, he's got a family, but he keeps an eye on all of this stuff. And I think he is so, touched in with how the league was and kind of what's missing from it. There's a lot of things I want to react to, so let's do that on the other side. Became Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.
We want in your head 24 hours a day. The 101 ESPN app in your App Store or Google Play. TMA? Then nominate yourself to be the Morning After Listener of the Month. Sign up now at 101ESPN.com or TMASTL.com.
The TMA Listener of the Month Club is quenched by Milagro Tequila. Welcome to a brighter side of tequila with Milagro Tequila.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
You got a text on the Air Comfort Service text line that says, wait, I thought Joey was the best. Is BK back from vacation? No, look, unlike BK, I don't call everybody the best. I tell the people that legitimately are the best. And that's Joey and David Backus. I mean, he's fantastic. He is one of the best interviews and always has been. Like in the locker room when he was with the Blues back in the 2011, 2012, when they were bad, when they started to get good, he was always there. Always gave thoughtful answers and never afraid to speak the truth. And that's where I really feels like it comes down to with David Backus. And so I wanted to react to a little bit that he had to say there, a couple of nuggets. And if you missed anything from our interview with David, you could check it out after the show today on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, which is always brought to you by Schaefer Door Company. The first thing that he said was talking about that team and the group that was on the bench with him. He said, the message from Ken Hitchcock was very clear. We played the audio yesterday where it was all about checking. It was taking away space, taking away time, creating puck support. And Backus said, our team knew exactly what to expect. The first one out of the foxhole was going to be fired, followed by the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth guy. And what he means by that is something that Darren Pang used to always talk about. He said, you know when a team is on the same page, when on the television screen, all five are in the shot. He said, when you see them spread out, when you see guys really fall apart, that's when a team's disconnected. And he's absolutely correct. What I remember most about that team is every time one guy went in, there were two others behind him that were forcing the puck loose. And that's what made them so hard to play against. It wasn't the heavy hits. It wasn't the fights. It was the fact that every time a puck went in deep, the players recognized, like, oh, shoot, this guy's coming after me. And then he followed that up with, like, look, everybody has their own opinions, style, mentality. There's entitlement. There's selfishness. But he said not one person on that team was ever able to second guess what my commitment was, what Alexander Steen's commitment was, what Alex Petrangelo's commitment was. He said every single shift, you knew what those guys were leaving out there. So when you had to have the tough conversations with the players, there was no pushback because I'm doing it on a nightly basis. And when you see me do that, how can you second guess it? You heard him reference Boston. Look at what Boston was for the longest time. Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, Zdeno Chara. Every single shift you knew what you were getting. I thought he painted the perfect picture of what that Blues team was. And when you ask and go back and say, like, hey, why? What are they missing? That. The commitment to go out there and do what the next guy is doing and not just saying, I can do this myself.
Yeah, and another thing that really stood out to me that David Backus said was when he was referencing his time on the Boston Bruins, and he was talking about how it doesn't matter how good of a player you were, how talented of a player you were. If you weren't clicking with the system, if you weren't willing to buy into the system, you were gone. And it didn't matter. And the first thing I thought of whenever David Backus said that immediately was Tyler Seguin.
Yeah,
immediately.
I think that's who he's talking about. Yeah. Seguin was traded after that Cup run.
Yes, they had just won a Stanley Cup, and he was traded, and that's when he was 19 years old.
Yep.
Traded as a 19-year-old. Like, we're talking about how we value some of these players on the Blues who are in their 20s, and I'm not saying they don't have a ton of value. They do, and I'm not saying they should be traded. But think about the Boston Bruins. You have a Tyler Seguin, a young star in the league that you just won a cup with, but if he's not going to buy into the system, he's gone.
Yeah. Well,
and that's exactly what they did. And by the way, Tyler Seguin's been on some great teams in Dallas. He's never won a Stanley Cup since then.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever gotten to. Have they gotten to a Stanley Cup final?
They got to a final in the bubble season.
Final. Oh, okay, so a fake season.
Yeah.
You asked them the question, how long can you be patient with a player? and players, really. I mean, we're not singling one person out, because obviously this is more than just one person. This is a lot of people from whatever the Blues are struggling with right now, and Jim Montgomery's trying to find out answers. And heck, for all we know, they could invest now after the Brandon Saad noise and Doug Armstrong speaking and go out there and rally off some wins. That could happen. That's an eye-opening moment. But when you asked him kind of the patience factor, the first thing I thought of was Vladimir Tarasenko. And he even referenced it. You know, when Vladimir Tarasenko was first playing in the National Hockey League, I believe that was the 2013 season, 2012-2013, when he first got to St. Louis. And if I'm not mistaken, and I could be totally off on this date, it was that 2014-2015 season that Backes and Tarasenko got into it. And the quote that David told us was, he needed to buy into the team culture. Now, some of this, and David is absolutely correct, players, the way they play, the mentality that they have, it's different from what it was 10 years ago. You know, you can't have the throw fists in a practice and expect them to come out and play harder to prove them wrong. He's right. A lot of guys kind of say, well, bleep this. I'm not going to put any effort in, and I want out. I know the Fastline was talking about this yesterday. Players have a lot more control in the game than what they used to have. So it is a fine line that you have to balance. But it takes a special kind of locker room to have a leadership group that can approach a player and say, you are not buying into the style that this team needs to win. And unless you do, we're going to have to figure something else out. And I really feel like what took place on Tuesday with Doug Armstrong was the start of that. You know, I was reading an article today from Joe Smith of The Athletic, who covers the Minnesota Wild. 3 games ago, Minnesota Wild got their butts kicked. Forget which team it was against, but they got embarrassed. John Hines afterwards came out and basically called his team out and said, we looked like we were trying to lose. Had a couple of other pretty brutal comments towards his team. And mind you, this is a team that's without Kirill Kaprizov, their best player, one of the best in the game. He said that, and Joe Smith's reporting on The Athletic was that Minnesota Wild group went out to dinner the next night and discussed how that was not appropriate, how they played, and they need to figure it out. And they've manhandled their last 2 opponents. That is the adversity that the Blues are still searching for. How do you handle that? Because what David said in terms of the patience with the players, yeah, when you've got generational talent, you don't want to give up on them. But you think Vancouver's just going to sit around and wait for Elias Pettersson to figure it out? They've obviously had their scuffles in terms of focusing and being very blunt about it, saying you need to be better if we want to have any success. And what's Elias Pettersson doing? Not living up to expectations. What's J.C. Miller doing? Not living up to expectations. At some point, the words from the coaching staff won't do enough. It comes down to the players. The trajectory is GM, coach, leadership, locker room. Right now, the coach to the locker room is not happening. So now they're going GM to the locker room. And if that doesn't happen, that's when I think you start to see, okay, I think patience has run out because you've done everything. And people love to push back on Jordan Kyrou. Kyrou's figured it out this season.
Yeah.
I don't know if something took place in the locker room to where a Shen or one of the other leaders pulled him aside and said something to him. You can dislike Kyrou all you want, but he's playing the level that they need him to play. Focus is the fact 15 games, Shen, Kyrou, and Holloway have not been broken up. What other lines have been broken up? He's figured it out. Now it's when do the other guys figure it out. And that's where I feel like that patience is really coming into play.
You know what else he said that kind of stuck out to me too? Because there's so much that goes on that we'll just never know. Like, we'll never know a lot of the details and the personal stuff, the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on. But he started talking about it, you know, if there's drama between 2 players' wives. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are so many aspects of this that we have no idea about. But it's even something as simple as that. But it's the communication from player to leadership, leadership to coach, coach to GM, as you were just talking about. He said it's you know, it goes both ways. And I think, you know, sometimes we can think what we want about a player, but we'll never actually know what's going on and what the problem is. But that's where the leadership comes in, and that's where David Backus was so good, and I loved that insight that he just gave us.
Make sure you go back and listen to that podcast. Do yourself a favor. It was outstanding stuff from David Backus, and again, you can check that out on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll get back into some baseball because Keith Law, everybody's favorite, he had a ranking system out for the Cardinals pipeline earlier today. Not where you wanted it to see, but I do have a bright side comment that I want to provide and see if anybody's willing to invest in that optimism. Next on 101 ESPN.
Tune in this Friday from 11 to 2 as BK and Ferrario broadcast live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Craving great food? Schatzi's Bar and Grill in South County has it all, just 1 block north of Tesson Ferry in Lindbergh. The home of the Brain Sandwich is famous for the pizza and delicious soups, salads, sandwiches, and more. With daily lunch specials and dinner deals Monday through Thursday. Catch happy hour Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. with drink and appetizer specials. Open late with free parking and carry-out available. Learn more at Schatzis.com. Schatzi's Bar and Grill, a South County tradition proudly supported by Kuna Food Service.
Be a part of the show. Text the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line at 314-399-9646 on 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Buchnevich back on the ice. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. After missing Tuesday's session for maintenance purposes, Blues forward Pavel Buchnevich was active this morning in Maryland Heights. His top-line running mates, per our athletic insider Jeremy Rutherford, Robert Thomas, and Alexander Texier. St. Louis visits fourth-place Colorado tomorrow. Puck drop happening right here at 8 p.m. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
I think they have kind of a middle-of-the-pack farm system here. They've promoted a lot of talent, obviously, to the majors the last couple of years. And I think what they've shown they're pretty good at is developing some of those back-end starter/reliever types. It's been hard for them to develop top-end starters, and it's just their misfortune, I guess, in the sense that the one year they picked top 10, which they haven't done that in forever, right? There's just not a guy. I mean, like I said, they would have been really reaching to go take whoever was the next best starting pitcher on their board. I don't think they're complaining about getting Weatherholt, but if you had the mindset that they had to get a pitcher, this just wasn't the year.
That was the voice of Keith Law. And every time I say those two words, everybody goes, ugh, Keith Law, or some cuss words probably at the radio. But no, Keith Law, that was back when the previous draft took place and the Blues selected J.J. Weatherholt, and we had him on BK and Ferrario to talk about the Cardinals pipeline. And you heard what he said. And what he said is backed up by what was in The Athletic, his article earlier today, where he ranked the pipelines in Major League Baseball. Honestly, this is a little bit better than I thought they would be at. They were ranked at number 14 in Major League Baseball in terms of pipeline. The same pipeline as the Texas Rangers, the Chicago White Sox, the New York Mets. That tier is where the Cardinals were at. And this is what he wrote in his piece. They've got a lot of untapped potential in their system beyond their top 5. Right now, it's a big pile of prospects who will get to the majors, but maybe not as impact players, fifth starters, middle relievers, and backups. Yet some of them at least have the tools or skills to be something more. The talent here probably outstrips the production you see on the stat sheets. Now, this is something I don't do, and put optimism into the Cardinals. Like, people know me as somebody who doesn't like the Cardinals very much, and I don't like the previous iteration of the Cardinals. But Rob Cerfolio is the reason why I wonder if people should be a lot more optimistic about this Cardinals team. For those that don't know, Cerfolio is the one that they brought in from the Cleveland Guardians system. He was the farm director for them, or he was a part of the farm director system, or the group that was put together with Cleveland. And now he's brought in to be the assistant general manager in charge of that farm director spot. He's player management in the minor leagues. You know where the Cleveland Guardians rank on Keith Law's pipeline? 5th in Major League Baseball. They're in Tier 2 with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And when you go through what the Cleveland Guardians have done in the past, it's not like they're drafting guys top 5 every single year. For a long stretch, when Cerfolio was over there and helping out with their group, they were selecting bottom of the first round, but their stars today are Shane Bieber, Tanner Beebe. These guys were drafted in the 4th and the 5th round. So the optimism that I can look at and say, okay, maybe we don't believe in the major league group right now, and maybe there's still some what ifs. I can't deny a minor league system and a farm system that now is presented to a guy that for the last 10 years has been selecting in the middle to the end of the draft and still a top 5 pipeline in Major League Baseball.
And that is the model, guys, that you aspire to reach, even in the midst of, let's call it a retooling period of sorts for St. Louis, without having to tear everything down to the studs. You referenced Cleveland, obviously coming over from the Guardians organization. Dare I include an organization such as Tampa Bay also in this particular conversation, because you're talking about teams that haven't had to go to completely dire straits, but what have they been able to do consistently over the past decade plus? Reach the postseason with regularity, and also be able to do so through that model of drafting well and then having, this is very important, the coaching staffs in place to properly evaluate and develop said talent, because you understand you're not going to be competing with the coastal outfits, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, etc. You have the ability to draft, and then you have to cultivate that talent accordingly. And I think this is really relevant, obviously, to the Cardinals, because you know that you're going to have to modify the approach to some degree. It's going to be different under a Chaim Bloom than a John Mozeliak. We don't know exactly the extent to which it's going to be different, but we know that he too comes from that model of basically taking that young talent, trying to mold it. For me, it boils a lot down to the coaching staff being in place too, because you mentioned the names, Alex, of course, of a Bieber in Cleveland, as well as Bibby for that matter as well. These guys were not blue chips, and yet how have they been able to reach these premier levels of production? It's because they've had the staffs on hand to raise their respective levels. You got to have that working hand in hand.
So real quick, they've got 3 guys, if I'm looking at this correctly, in Major League Baseball's top 100 prospects. Now, everybody has different prospect ranking systems, but I'm just going off because I have it in front of me. MLB.com's top prospects in baseball. They've got a top 10 prospect in all of baseball right now. That guy was just drafted 5th overall. Where do the Cardinals select this upcoming draft? I believe it's 5th or 6th, if I'm not mistaken. But you're above the top 10. You're in the same threshold. But then when you go through a couple of these other guys that are top 100 prospects for them, they got an outfielder who was ranked 36 in Major League Baseball. He was drafted at 16th overall. They've got a guy who is 63rd in Major League Baseball. He was drafted, he was signed as an international free agent 3 years ago. What I'm trying to get at is when you look at the top 100, and by the way, the Cardinals have Tink Hence, they've got Quinn Matthews, they've got J.J. Weatherholt in this. What I'm getting at is, yes, they have a guy that they selected 5th overall. But this is also a team that's been drafted in 26th overall, 3rd round, 4th round. And for about 5-year span, they found ways to get players in the top 100 of Major League Baseball or have legitimate top 10 prospects in baseball. And that comes from the farm system and identifying the right guys and then developing them properly in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and let's be honest about this, too. We all like the model. We approve of it. It's exactly the sort of thing that you want to have, that you want to continue to develop moving into the future. But nobody is going to be complaining about the total shape or the total form of the system, of the farm aspects, if, Grant, you have a couple of guys in just the next several seasons, the likes of which were really held in that high esteem. The Quinn Matthews, you mentioned him, Alex. This is somebody who, in just the span of a season, multiple levels of the minor leagues, he wasn't even considered some consensus top 50 prospect in all of baseball. He wasn't among the Cardinals' very top options just last season. But if you have one of these guys, maybe even 2 of them hit, let's say that Hintz actually is the one to make a similar leap through the minor leagues this season. Who knows when a Matthews actually could reach this rotation, maybe be needed in the rotation in 2025. We won't be talking as much about the long-term trajectory. Okay, what about that next wave, that next generation? Because if you're able to have not a diamond in a rough, Grant, but one of those stars actually come up big, that satisfies a lot of the concerns that you may have long-term.
Well, here's a point of optimism for me, too. And again, I'm not usually the highest on the Cardinals either, but I mean, we all know the Cardinals don't spin like crazy. But I mean, you look at a team like the Guardians, who were 23rd in the league last year when it comes to spending, and they're able to get it done. Why? Because they have that prospect pool. If the Cardinals start to build that prospect pool and really build it up to the point where they're doing something similar to Cleveland, I mean, the Cardinals did spend $70 million more than the Guardians just did. So not only do you have that prospect pool, but you are spending a considerable amount more on your payroll than the Guardians are.
No, that's a great point. And how much of that is dedicated to Jose Ramirez only.
Right.
So that really tells you a lot.
Grant Francis, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. We will take our final break. We'll come back and hit the rewind as we close it down here on 101 ESPN.
This Sunday, it's the NFL Pro Bowl. Kickoff at 2. Your exclusive home for the NFL playoffs is 101 ESPN. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Down here with today's Rewind, BK and Ferrario Rewind. I'm Alex Ferrario. Grant Francis, Bradford Bruns have done an outstanding job once again today, filling in for both T-Bone and BK. Hope they don't need to come back tomorrow. Hopefully they can enjoy a day off since they filled in for these last two, but we'll wait and see kind of how T-Bone's feeling. Hopefully T-Bone's feeling a little bit better today. But
game time decision again.
Game time decision, which we all know how those game time decisions typically go. With T-Bone, I give him the benefit of the doubt. BK was a big game time decision. I'd say plan on the three of us being here tomorrow.
He'll be reevaluated in the morning.
Lower body or upper body?
I believe upper.
Let's hope it's upper because lower bodies are not fun.
You saw a lot of good tidings, though, and nice words about hoping that Tanner, if and, when he recovers, he's able to get as many hot dogs as he would like. So always appreciate that.
I bet you he would dry vomit in his mouth. He would dry heave if you brought up a hot dog right now. I can understand that one, honestly. So if you missed anything from our show today, go back and check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Our free podcast is brought to you by the Schaefer Door Company. Also, the free 101 ESPN app, super easy to download and navigate. Make sure you're logged in, signed in to get all the good giveaways that are available to you. But that 101 ESPN app is brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. And you can also go check it out on the YouTube page, 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cams brought to you by Air Alliance team. Bradford, Grant, everybody does a phenomenal job of putting the entire show up there. It's segmented, so you can go back through specifically if there's certain segments you want to go back and listen to. We had great conversations today with the Springfield Thunderbirds head coach, Steve Konowalchuk, who had glowing reviews about a couple of Blues prospects, specifically one that I was kind of surprised that he was so excited about. So you can go back and listen to that interview. We talked about the Blues and the press conference that took place on Tuesday with Joe Vitale, and he gave us his thoughts on if the Blues should investigate the Elias Pettersson trade scenario, which we also discussed. And a little bit ago, we talked to David Backus just about culture and mindset and leadership where the Blues are struggling right now. All were great. Go back and listen to that podcast. Let's wrap up from the practice today. If you missed it, Brandon Saad was placed on waivers for purpose of contract termination. If he's not claimed by tomorrow, he will officially be off the Blues books, and he will be a free agent to sign with any NHL team. My guess, my tinfoil theory, he's going to have a deal in place with another team pretty quickly to get on, join them, maybe have a shot at a playoff run potentially.
Yeah, for people wondering too, like why would he not have been picked up off of waivers if a team's just going to go ahead and sign him anyway? They didn't want him for the $4.5 million.
And they didn't want him next year.
Right.
They want him this year.
What it looks like is likely for Brandon Saad. If he does get a multi-year contract, it'll probably be for a very low AAV.
Yeah.
And what's most likely, what I would think, would be a one-year contract or, the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And at league minimum or $1 million.
It's going to be performance bonuses to where he goes somewhere, and if he plays certain games, scores certain points, he gets those. And then he tries to reset the market. My guess, he signed a one-year deal in the offseason, goes somewhere, try and reset the market again. He's not old by any means. He just wasn't performing to the level they needed him to.
I do think he'll help a team, though. I do think he will.
My guess is he goes to the Edmonton Oilers.
I could see it.
Stan Bowman, guy who drafted him, played under. Their wingers right now have been Kasperi Kapanen, who I hate to break this to you, Blues fans. He's got 5 goals in 28 games. Oh, what we would do to have Kasperi Kapanen on the squad.
That's what he did when he got claimed off of waivers here, though. So
I can see that, and I can also see the Columbus Blue Jackets giving him a call and saying, like, hey, we got a different team now. Would you be interested in coming here? So kind of keep track of that one. But more importantly, Texier got a shot on the top line today. Now, I don't know. They're still not willing to break up that Shen Holloway and Kyrou line. I get it. They're the ones that are performing. Me personally, I kind of would like to see what it looked like with a different group of players, but this is a massive opportunity for Texier. And we'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow, but it's a little bold to put Texier, who's been inconsistent, with 2 other guys that are also inconsistent. And by the way, you're going on the road where the other team gets favorable matchups. This is a massive responsibility for Alex Texier. But it's also a massive moment for Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich because you haven't been performing consistently either. You got to figure it out as a line combination, and there's no, breaking up things to put better players with you.
It's a tough first assignment for Alexander Texier coming back into the lineup after Doug Armstrong said he wants to see more of him. You're going into a line where it's the two players that have been highlighted as struggling recently, and you are sliding in there hoping to fix that line as a player that's been scratched for the majority of the season. So definitely not an easy task for Alexander Texier, but you know what? You want to impress somebody? This is your opportunity right here. You go make that line click, and all of a sudden you got a lot of eyes on you, and you're impressing big time.
Colorado and Utah, 2-game road trip that starts Friday. Sunday is the game against Utah. Big shout out once again to Bradford and Grant. We will talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. from Centene. The Fast Lane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Jamie Rivers here, and this week I am giving away a signed Colton Parayko number 55 jersey away. It is awesome. Big old Colt 55, that slap shot from the blue line. Now you can wear the same jersey that he wears, and it's signed. And all you have to do to get entered to win this autographed jersey is go to 101ESPN.com or visit 101, the mobile app powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.